On a speeding vehicle, this young man was filled with panic as he suddenly woke up, initially thinking that he was still dreaming. But he quickly realized that this was his old body, and the scenery seemed to match exactly what he had experienced in the past. The vehicle was speeding down the road when the driver suddenly had to slam on the brakes as a herd of orcs appeared in front of them, causing the driver to urgently hit the side of the truck. "Hey, there's an orc monster ahead. Everyone get your weapons ready." Quickly, those around Yujin grabbed their guns and jumped out of the truck, while the monsters also quickly noticed them and charged forward. Listen carefully, we don't have enough bullets, so only shoot when you're absolutely sure." An older man seemingly experienced in combat spoke up. But just as he finished speaking, a loud bang echoed, causing the group to turn in shock to see who had fired the gun. So early with the gun. After that, they soon discovered that the previous shot had been successful. A headshot on the first orc with incredible accuracy, and the shooter was none other than Kim Yujin. As the first orc fell, the remaining monsters became even more aggressive. However, Yujin maintained his calm demeanor and continued firing, this time with 2 consecutive shots, both hitting the 4th orc that approached him at very close range. So close that he couldn't shoot. Fortunately, Yujin had extensive combat experience and quickly backed away to escape. If it had been someone else, they might have been smashed by its weapon. After widening the distance just enough, Yujin continued shooting, and this 4th bullet also hit its target, even fired while he was jumping in the air. This proved that Yujin's accuracy with each bullet was nearly 100%, leaving only one orc which couldn't escape its fate like its kin. Just like that, Yujin single-handedly succeeded in eliminating an entire group of orcs, something that the other group of people might not have achieved even if they worked together. That's why, at this moment, everyone's face displayed a look of disbelief. It was only natural. How could they imagine that Yujin had the strength to face 5 orcs alone? As for Kim Yujin, after the swift battle, he gradually believed that this was no longer just a dream because the feeling was too real. If it were a dream, it would be too vivid. At this moment, the older man suddenly approached Yujin, but instead of praising him, he loudly criticized, "What are you doing, Kim Yujin? Are you trying to let everyone die? Are you trying to get us all killed?" Yujin didn't even bother to pay attention to him, as he hadn't even finished processing the fact that he had reincarnated back to the past. Yujin lowered his head and trudged forward. Seeing him not respond made the man even angrier. "Hey, you! When someone talks to you, at least you should know how to answer. That brat." Yujin's strange attitude has caused everyone to buzz with curiosity, asking each other what was wrong with him today. First, he was fighting alone against the orcs, stealing the spotlight from others, and now he was sitting in a corner, constantly holding his head, but they couldn't understand what was happening. In Yujin's mind, he hadn't fully accepted the fact that he had regressed and returned with Yujin. Surely there was a deep-seated resentment towards Lee Se-jun and Park Shin-hee. If heaven had given him a chance to live again, then in this life he definitely wouldn't let those 2 bastards have their way. Just then, Yujin received a notification that he had awakened to become a player. Immediately before Yujin appeared 3 classes: the Immortal Warrior, the Hell Messenger, and the Hunter, silently remembering that today in his previous life was also the day he awakened. But these 3 class choices were completely different from the past. Among the 3 classes appearing before him, the one called the Hell Messenger caught his attention the most. This class was granted the power to use various poisons and curses. It was a class that allowed players to create an army of darkness from the dead monsters, as it was granted more biased powers compared to the holy classes. Therefore, the consequence was that only one player monopolized most of these powers. In his previous life, Johann Josh, also known by another name, the Poison King, had received favor from the Hell Messenger and held all the powers. He became the strongest player in his previous life. If Lee Seung-jun was the hero, then Johann Josh was the monster that Yujin had to defeat. He had to study and analyze this class very thoroughly. He never expected to come back to life, that he would have a chance with this terrifying class. And without much thought, Yujin chose it. He had made his decision. In this life, he would not be Johann Joji, but he would become the monster to take revenge on all those hypocritical bastards. After the players appeared, another concept was introduced: the Guild. It referred to groups that provided benefits for players. At that time, the Phoenix Guild used every means to amass wealth and power to rise to the 2nd position among the guilds in Korea through the dark image of the Phoenix Guild. The noble ideals of the Messiah Guild, led by Lee Se-jun, became even more radiant. After that, Yujin continued to make a decision contrary to his previous life choices. He went to the headquarters of the Phoenix Guild and placed a contract on the table which clearly stated the guild's conditions along with a promise that each time he cleared a dungeon, he would receive additional payment. Yu-Jin read the contract very carefully. To be honest, the amount of money was not enough to buy the items he needed, but there was no other way. Who said he couldn't join the Messiah Guild? How to prove his status as a player then? Isn't it just a matter of checking the player's status? Yu-Jin asked the other party, who suddenly broke into a wicked smile, then pulled something out from his chest and placed it on the table. He said this was a special spell for the Hell Messenger. Yu-Jin just needed to choose one of them and tear it. If he was indeed a player, then the guy could verify it with his own eyes. Yu-Jin looked at the spells on the table and quickly focused on something called Blood Poison Water. The condition to accept it was to have the class of Hell Messenger. This was a skill that could turn a player's blood into poison. The higher the player's level and skill rank, the stronger the toxicity of the blood. So this was the place to obtain these things. The stronger it gets, it turns out this is where you can obtain these things. Yu-Jin silently thought that blood poison water is a very complex skill. Although the skill itself is simple, when combined with the blood golem skill, its effectiveness would be maximized. Becoming a skill combo worth using, Yu-Jin chose blood poison water and then decisively tore it in two. He immediately acquired this skill. This means that Yu-Jin has proven his status as a player. His profession is now established with the opponent. Yu-Jin successfully joined the Phoenix Guild and began his journey to conquer dungeons in this life. That night, he dreamed a dream where Yu-Jin saw his old teammates from his previous life. At that time, he was given a new nickname, the Hound. Although it didn't quite fit his holy light every time he went on a dungeon raid, he exhibited the behavior of a bloodthirsty beast. This appearance made any of Yu-Jin's teammates fear him, and that day was no exception, as his teammates were still discussing this unpleasant nickname. Suddenly, Yu-Jin's sharp voice rang out, startling them. "Our hunting trip has begun. Get ready for this hunt." Such hunting trips, although arduous, gradually built Yu-Jin's trust in people. Unfortunately, that was just a dream. When he woke up, it was nearly dawn. Looking at the clock on his phone, Yu-Jin remembered that he had died and come back to life once. And because he had returned to the past, the evil enemies were still lurking out there. Yu-Jin was truly anxious, wondering if he would encounter them again after some time. The next morning, he had his first dungeon conquest in this life. The meeting point was at One Moon Park. The party consisted of 5 people, 4 of whom had arrived early, including a bald man named Yosiop. Having experienced hunting 4 times, he was particularly trusted by the other 3 members, but when would the last person arrive? Yosiop asked, and just as he finished speaking, they heard the sound of tires grinding on the pavement, creating an extremely jarring noise. All 4 of their gazes turned towards it. They saw an old vehicle appear. That brat was also going on his first hunt today, yet arrived the latest, showing no manners as a newcomer. The man in the golden torque in the team clicked his tongue, speaking in a very annoyed tone. At this moment, Yu-Jin had stepped out of the car. "We should be grateful to have him on our team." "And what is that shabby co-RC vehicle?" The only woman in the team couldn't help but criticize. Looking at that figure, it's clear he didn't even receive the guild's support items properly. Even if it's his first time hunting, he probably can only focus on keeping his life intact and not getting killed. Let's not pay attention to him, let's go. And so Yu-Jin was isolated by his own team on his first hunting trip. Even Yosiop, as the captain, advised the other members to ignore him. "Just consider our team as missing one person." It seemed he was already accustomed to loneliness. So when he saw the 4 of them happily chatting and excluding him, Yu-Jin felt not a single ripple in his heart. Before officially entering the dungeon, their 5-member team was briefed on the basic knowledge of the place they were about to conquer, which was a famous dungeon called the Goblin Lair. It was a single level, with the entry requirement being level 10 or lower. The condition for completion was to eliminate all the goblins in the dungeon. Does anyone have any questions or want to give up? One level with the entry requirement being level 10 or below the condition to complete is to eliminate all the goblins in the dungeon. Does anyone have any issues or want to give up? If you have time, feel free to speak up. If not, please check the space bag one more time, the person in charge said, while Yu-Jin seemed to ignore the glances filled with meaning. The intention of the 4 teammates looking at him made him secretly scoff after all. They were just people whose faces and names he didn't know, so he didn't need to pay attention to them anymore. After all, he could clear out the shabby dungeon by himself. After preparing, the 5 of them approached the entrance to the dungeon, 3 of the 5 present here. It was the first time conquering a dungeon, so he couldn't help but be overwhelmed by its grandeur. And after passing through that gate, they entered a completely different world. A quiet forest surrounded on all sides, and each of them had changed their outfits. The gear suited their professions. This wasn't virtual reality, it was reality. Everyone don't let your guard down here or out there. We only have this one life. Yoseob, as the team leader, immediately reminded his teammates, but as soon as he finished speaking, he saw Ujin separating from the team and going in a different direction. He carefully observed the trees around, relying on the traces there, to deduce that the number of goblins in the dungeon was not small at all, seeing Ujin so quiet. Yoseob took the opportunity to bully him, so he assigned him the task of scouting the surroundings, while the other four set up camp here, clearly pushing the most dangerous task onto him. But Ujin didn't bother calculating and immediately agreed, thinking it wouldn't be too hard. Little did he know it was dangerous. Agreeing so easily was indeed foolish. The others murmured, "Now let's prepare to hunt. Now all the items belong to us." At this moment, Yoseob drew his sword. His real target was to push Ujin away so he wouldn't have to share the loot with him. Of course, Ujin wasn't foolish enough not to realize that. But coincidentally, this suited him well. After all, he didn't want to be with those foolish people at all. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Messiah Guild, all the key members were gathered in the meeting room because that day the guild had a new member. He was also the one assigned to carry out this mission. As the door opened, Jang Ji-hoo, a prominent member of the guild, gritted his teeth and thought so it turns out to be that unlucky brat. "It's a pleasure. I'm Suzuki Aichi," the one who just entered spoke up. "There are so many familiar faces, so I guess I don't need to introduce myself anymore, right?" This person's voice was full of arrogance, so much so that even Lee Seojin had to nod in admiration. He really had spirit. "It's nice to meet you. I'm Lee Seojin. What do I need to do?" Aichi replied curtly. This attitude made Jang Ji-hoo, who was sitting next to him, angry and banged the table, shouting, "You brat, try talking rudely to the boss like that one more time." Even though the other party was threatening him, Aichi seemed unfazed at all. He lazily glanced over, but didn't even bother to turn and look at Ji-hoo, which made him even more furious. He really didn't understand why his boss would bring such an arrogant person here. In this room, besides Lee Seung-jae, there were many other prominent names, such as Noda Hajiro, nicknamed the God of the Bow, or Sukahara Ken, nicknamed the God of the Sword. Besides Lee Seung-jae, there are many other notable names, such as Noda Hajiro, nicknamed the God of Bows, or Sukahara Ken, known as the God of Swords. But until now, they have all been silent. Only Ji-hoo cannot control his emotions, and the angrier he gets, the more arrogant Aichi becomes. "Are you angry? Is my speech and actions making you uncomfortable? Or is it because of the previous incident with the body size mismatch? Are you still holding on to that?" "What did you say, you brat?" Ji-hoo yelled again. "You came to the right place today." The onlookers could only sigh in exasperation as they all realized that Ji-hoo was starting his old tricks of bullying the new guy again. However, Suzuki Aichi is not someone to mess with, but just as both sides were about to clash, Sejun lost all patience and spoke up, "That's enough, stop it." Ji-hoo turned his head and met the icy gaze of the guild president, and his anger immediately dissipated, replaced by an invisible fear, though he was unwilling. But Ji-hoo still had to sulk and sit down, thinking to himself that he would definitely make that arrogant guy pay later. Dr. He spoke up to continue the meeting about the matter I mentioned earlier. "If it's just about finding the location of the materials, then 3 days is fine." Before she could finish her sentence, Aichi replied decisively, and Lisa June nodded in agreement, saying that 3 days isn't too bad. As for what they were specifically discussing regarding the 3-day plan that will be revealed later, returning to the Goblin Dungeon where Yu Jin had just separated from his teammates, he had heard details about it in his previous life. After surveying the surroundings, Yu Jin realized that what he had heard was indeed true, and a bittersweet emotion suddenly arose in his heart. Now looking back, Yu Jin found it quite amusing that whether it was this reconnaissance or the way of fighting, it was all taught to him by Suzuki Hachi, whom he thought was teaching him for his own sake. But little did he know that it was actually all for the Messiah Guild, and Yu Jin had been following that ruthless killer for a long time, and he had become a loyal hunting dog for the Messiah Guild. However, they probably did not think that this teaching would now become a double-edged sword aimed back at them. At this moment, Yu Jin had just finished surveying a tree and jumped to the ground. As soon as his feet touched the ground, something suddenly tore through the air. The wind rushed by, and Yu Jin deftly dodged to the right, narrowly avoiding it. The monster had appeared. It was 3 extremely aggressive goblins. Ujin quickly opened his inventory and took out a dagger, his hot blood beginning to boil as he prepared to take on the goblins. This was quite similar to the goblins in the 7-level dungeon that he frequently visited not long ago. Now they were just targets for him to test the newly learned blood poisoning skill. Thinking this, Ujin used the dagger to cut into his palm. Fresh blood immediately flowed out, and when the 3 goblins began to attack, he used that bloody dagger to counterattack. Ujin had more than enough strength to finish them off with this weapon, but he chose to stab the goblin's arm to test the skill, and immediately he received a notification that it had been poisoned. A moment later, the goblin that Ujin had stabbed with the dagger went berserk from the pain and turned to attack him again. Ujin seemed visibly disappointed that it had been poisoned, and the goblin was still this strong. It seems that the effect of that skill isn't very good, probably because his level is still quite low. Seeing one was not enough to deal with Ujin, the goblin's kin quickly charged in to assist. This time, Ujin had truly lost his patience. Ujin spun the dagger in his hand and then threw it straight forward, hitting the goblin right between the eyes, causing it to collapse in confusion among its kin. Ujin twirled the dagger in his hand and then threw it straight ahead, hitting the goblin charging at him right between the eyes, causing it to collapse in confusion among its kind. The reality of the battle pattern with the goblins is quite clear. They are not difficult to deal with. However, if the time drags on, they will come in greater numbers, and that can get a bit complicated. Seeing the goblins rushing in, Ujin quickly changed his strategy. This time, he didn't use a dagger anymore. Instead, he opted for another weapon, a whip. When the effect of the chief goblin's whip was activated, the gathered goblins all trembled in fear, and that effect made Ujin feel very satisfied. Preparing in advance was indeed the right choice, he muttered. At the same time, the 4 fools who had pushed Ujin away were also facing a surprise attack from the goblins, each one of them extremely aggressive, although 3 of them lacked experience. They would surely fall into panic with only Joseph being considered the one with the best combat skills stepping up to block the first attack from the goblins. In the eyes of those 3 clueless guys, the guy at this moment looked as heroic as a champion. "What are you doing, huh? Don't be afraid of these low-level goblins," Joseph shouted loudly. "Come on, focus!" There's no need to be scared of these goblins. In fact, he was just as tense as anyone else. But Joseph, to maintain his hero image, could only encourage himself that he was determined. And he had prepared this longsword already. Besides, those goblins were just walking meat, not too dangerous at all. However, disaster quickly struck this bald guy. Somehow his longsword got stuck in the body of the goblin he had just killed, and he couldn't pull it out. Yoseob quickly fell into panic. He used all his strength but couldn't pull the blade out while the goblins began their second wave of attack. This time Joseph was not lucky enough to show off to the clueless ones anymore, as he took a full hit from a goblin and fell among these low-level monsters. But they did not hold back against players at all. Joseph's bald head was bleeding continuously. He was in excruciating pain. His whole body felt heavy as if crushed by stones. His vision was blurring, but seeing the goblins charging at him again, his strong survival instinct urged Joseph to flee. So he started to run while shouting for help. "Help, help me, don't just stand there gawking, you fools, hurry up!" In that situation, the 3 clueless players, though very scared, had no choice but to rush in because Joseph had fallen. If they did nothing, they would all end up in trouble, contrary to their struggling situation. Alone, Ujin faced a horde of goblins that outnumbered him many times but remained very relaxed. Each time he cracked the whip in his hand, he took down several goblins at once. Some even got so scared that they started to flee, but Ujin did not. He had no intention of sparing any opponent. The whip in his hand struck out at a speed even faster than the fleeing goblin, successfully wrapping around its neck. Ujin tightened his grip a bit. Immediately, this monster met its end, and he received a notification that the messenger from hell was interested in him, and he had also gained a new title. As someone who unexpectedly received attention, Ujin wore a satisfied smile. It was surprising that just defeating a few familiar goblins was enough to attract the attention of the envoy. Escaped from hell, then, thinking about the group that entered the dungeon with him. Ujin began to lament that only fools would swing those heavy swords around. Dealing with the goblins only requires this whip. What a waste of time in a place like this. Truly an indescribable foolish act. Without needing to think, Ujin knew those 4 were struggling immensely, and the reality proved that what he thought was correct. After teaming up, they had temporarily alleviated the danger. However, all of them were injured, some lightly and some heavily, and with a very heavy mood. That new guy must be in trouble. Suddenly, one of them spoke up. This statement was definitely inquiring about Ujin. If he didn't return to report any information, he must have been dead. Josiop replied at that moment. The trust of the newcomers in him had diminished greatly and was almost non-existent. They began to blame Mork Joseph for pushing Ujin away earlier. If it were 5 people working together, the situation would have been very different. Joseph not wanting to back down, so both sides began to argue fiercely, and the bickering only stopped when they suddenly heard a loud screech. Instinctively, they all stood up, leaning against each other, weapons raised in 4 directions. As the sound clearly came from the goblins, they feared they were about to be ambushed again. The sound indeed came from the goblins, but they were not ambushing Joseph's group. Rather, they were wailing in despair as Ujin slaughtered them. His process of hunting monsters was truly chill. Ujin continuously drew the attention of the Hell Envoy, and this time he even received a new skill called Marine Soldier. Quickly, Ujin opened his inventory. He didn't think he would receive this skill so early. In his previous life, this was the undead army considered the minions of the 5 poison kings, Johann and Josh. It was one of this man's core skills. However, on the other hand, this skill also had a fatal flaw that allowed Ujin to defeat the previous guy. That is, the user can only use the corpses of the monsters they personally killed to create undead soldiers. This is the critical limitation of this skill. But regardless with the time Ujin has, he is confident that he can master this skill. And so Ujin tore the piece in half to successfully learn the Marine Soldier skill, since it was a newly learned skill. The number of soldiers he could summon was currently just 1, but Ujin only needed it to help distract the enemy. That way, the hunt would be much easier. And so he quickly created a zombie goblin. To be honest, watching it transform before him was a bit nauseating. However, looking closely, its eyes filled with hatred pleased Ujin very much. The sky was a clear blue with a few clouds drifting over the mountain covered in greenery. Amidst that peaceful scenery, a sharp metallic sound faintly rang out as Kim Gu-jin quietly leaned against a tree. Silently observing the scene before him, he gently stroked his chin, his eyes showing a hint of disappointment. It was indeed not as expected, Kim Gu-jin muttered, because his magic power was still low. So it was only at this level. The fairy mist gently turned its head when it heard those words, its movements still clumsy, but there was life in its deep black eye sockets. A faint glimmer of light flickered. Like the first sign of the soul, it approached a hand, reaching out to place on its head. I already had a weapon to use as my main force. Suddenly, Kim Gu-jin's gaze froze after all that. The scene before him made him astonished. Was this a player? A question arose in his heart as he saw the human corpse hanging like a toy. Thoughts continuously flashed through Kim Gu-jin's mind. The common point of all monsters, from fairies to dragons, was that they were all entities harmful to humans. There was no reason that they would go easy on him just because he was a new player. After that, the two quickly approached the lair of the fairies. He thought to himself that he had nothing to worry about. I must distribute my compassion to all the monsters. At the same time, in another place, the sky was pitch black, the night engulfing the entire forest. Before a small fire, a group of people sat quietly resting. The faint light illuminated a silent forest. A large wound marked on Joseop's forehead, blood still oozing down. He cursed angrily at those damned fairies. Beside him, Sumi trembled, sobbing in fear. Miso anxiously asked him what they should do now. He lowered his head, his voice low. It seemed we had been too careless. He gritted his teeth and firmly said, "We cannot die like this." Josiop frowned, growling. After all, they were just fairies. Suddenly, he stood up angrily and shouted, "We cannot die in disgrace here." Miso was so shocked that she couldn't speak. She also stopped crying, wiping the tears still lingering on her eyelashes, her gaze fixed ahead. Hajin was stunned. Cold sweat rolled down his cheeks, confused. He called out, "Yoseo Byung." He shouted loudly, "What's wrong with everyone? Despite the hardships, we can do it." He pointed at Joseph, stammering, "No, not that." He frowned, his gaze immediately following the tip of his finger. "What do you mean?" Miso panicked. Her voice trembling above your head right now. Josiop curiously asked, "What are you talking about? Is there something on my head?" At that moment above him, the words "level cap" appeared, radiating a dazzling light. Joseph couldn't believe what he was seeing. Level cap. This wasn't during a battle. How could this happen? The only case where I sat still and my level still increased. He tried to remain calm, his voice firm. It was just a member of the team fighting. Yoseob was stunned, his voice filled with surprise. If that's the case, then that new guy is still alive. At this moment, Kim Gu-jin held a torch in his hand, the flickering flame illuminating the dark cave. At his feet, the fairy guards had been defeated, lying scattered on the ground. The cave entrance was now piled high with wood. Kim Gu-jin casually spoke based on his experience the most effective way to kill fairies is. His face was filled with pride. Not just this, Kim Gu-jin gently let go of the torch, which immediately fell, embedding itself into the pile of wood at the cave entrance. In an instant, the fire erupted fiercely, the bright red light engulfing the entire entrance. The two stood calmly waiting at the cave's mouth. Their shadows stretching long on the ground, the smell of smoke had seeped deep into every corner of the cave. A fairy snorted, sniffing its eyes, flashing with alertness. They panicked and turned towards the cave entrance, their bodies tense with fear as they saw the thick black smoke spreading in. They trembled, their eyes filled with panic. Soon the air in the cave was depleted. A few fairies clutched their throats, gasping painfully. They collapsed, writhing on the ground in extreme discomfort. One of them quickly pointed towards the cave entrance, signaling urgently. In that moment, the group of fairies seemed to awaken. Without hesitation, they rushed towards the cave entrance, each step seeming to drain all their strength. Outside, the flames continued to blaze fiercely. Suddenly, the pile of wood shifted. Accompanied by loud crashing sounds, Kim Gu-jin stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the fire. Soon, from the gaps, the faces of furious goblins appeared. They struggled desperately to save their lives, their screams echoing with resentment, their eyes gleaming with a fierce light as if they wanted to tear apart the one in front of them. He stood still, the corners of his mouth slightly curled, quietly savoring the results of his handiwork. Kim Gu-jin spoke sarcastically about the dead of the player's funeral. "You died because of you guys. Now it's time to settle the score, right?" In the sea of blazing red flames, countless desperate hands reached out trembling to grasp life only inches away. In an instant, they were all consumed by the fire, leaving nothing behind. The sound of crackling explosions and the smell of burnt flesh permeated the air as the flames surged violently, illuminating the entire forest. Suddenly, the system announced a message. "The messenger of hell was very pleased with your brutality. Soon the goblins were reduced to ashes." He frowned, his gaze fixed on the pile of ashes in front of him. Kim Gu-jin murmured, How strange." He tightened the whip in his hand, thinking that by now at least he could see it once. After that, Kim Gu-jin, feeling disappointed, turned and left. He felt a bit irritated. It was indeed troublesome. Was it hiding somewhere else? As the goblin bones turned away, a faint cracking sound echoed, and the ground beneath the pile of ashes slowly cracked open as if something was awakening beneath. Hearing the noise, it startled and turned back. In the blink of an eye, the ground exploded and a giant goblin burst forth from the earth. The goblin bones stood dumbfounded, watching as dirt and rocks fell onto them. The goblin was extremely furious, its mouth huffing with hot breaths. He immediately turned back and swung the whip down hard onto the ground, feeling lucky because this place was gradually becoming boring. Kim Gu-jin gritted his teeth, truly grateful that you appeared from beneath my feet. At this moment, the giant goblin was filled with a fierce aura, its eyes blazing with rage. It was the goblin boss. He continued, many rookies had lost their lives in this dungeon. Kim Gu-jin added it was all because of this goblin. He quickly spread his hand, channeling his energy, his gaze darkened. For the rookies, encountering a goblin champion in a goblin dungeon would be like meeting the Grim Reaper. With just a wave of his hand, a brilliant light flared up with Kim Gu-jin's motion, stirring thoughts within him. However, in an instant, the light extinguished, revealing the sword firmly in his hand. He was determined from now on. There would be no more victims. The goblin bones turned slightly, its cold gaze fixed on the sword, as its slender feet slowly stepped forward. Making a rustling sound in the still air, the actions of the goblin bones immediately caught Kim Gu-jin's attention. He exclaimed in surprise. It was waiting for the right moment. Suddenly, the skeletal soldier froze, its whole body stiffened. It slowly turned its head, its eyes gleaming with a cold light. Kim Gu-jin spoke with interest, the corners of his mouth slightly curling as he watched it. He continued, its expression had changed. Kim Gu-jin stepped back, leaning against a tree, his calm gaze observing in the tense atmosphere. He waited patiently for the battle that was about to unfold. You continue to say that its expression has changed. Kim Gu-jin stepped back, leaning against the tree trunk, his calm gaze observing amidst the atmosphere tense as a drawn bowstring. He waited quietly for the battle about to unfold. The angry goblin screeched, its eyes glowing fiercely, filled with murderous intent. In that moment, the skeleton soldier crouched down to gain momentum. Then it leaped forward towards the enemy. The skeleton soldier's speed was astonishing quickly, closing in on the opponent as Daniel shot upwards. Baring its fangs and claws, it roared as a threat to the opponent charging towards it. Suddenly, it spun around, sweeping its leg down to the ground, creating a cloud of dust, and with a decisive slash, it struck down on Daniel's foot, blood spurting out. He held himself, his eyes trembling slightly, and a thought echoed in his mind. It was Kim Guji recalling the battle with the giant dragon, its entire body ablaze in a sea of fiery red. The flames flickered fiercely, as if they wanted to burn down the entire space around the terrified man who screamed, "How could we possibly defeat it?" "You suggested attacking its legs, and—" Kim Gu-jin swiftly drew his sword to throw it off balance. At that moment, the chance of victory would come to us. He frowned with eyes blazing with steely determination, ready to face the danger ahead. Without hesitation, Kim Gu-jin leaped into the air, his sword slashing straight at the dragon's leg, his attack like a raging storm, its giant legs splattering blood everywhere. The horrifying shriek echoed everywhere the scene before Kim Gu-jin made him even more confident in that movement. I am sure at this moment Daniel was in pain, kneeling on the ground with the wooden mace stuck straight into the ground to help him maintain balance as the skeleton continued to attack. Repeating the previous moves, it slipped behind the opponent and then darted up like lightning. He was stunned, thinking about this fighting style. Instantly, a skeleton sword pierced straight into Dan's head, causing him to immediately exit the world. Kim Gu-jin could not help but be shocked, just like himself. He pondered, knowing that the skeleton soldiers would inherit part of his combat abilities and magical strength, but Kim Gu-jin excitedly thought to himself, "I didn't know they could replicate my fighting style." He eagerly recounted how he had used all kinds of weapons in the world before returning to the past. "Even in the view of Messiah, no one could solo me." Kim Gu-jin's next words left the skeleton soldiers bewildered, but I like it. He muttered perhaps my plan would have to change. With a clang, the sound rang out, and immediately the system appeared hovering in front of Kim Gu-jin. The flickering light startled him as he quickly pressed to open the notification. Surprised, he exclaimed, "This is the moment." It displayed the line, "Lord of the World of Darkness. Congratulations, you have completed a hidden achievement. You have received a legendary skill as a gift." Kim Gu-jin could not believe what he was seeing. Legendary rank, he joyfully smiled brightly. No one thought he would receive it here. Transitioning to the watchtower, a man exclaimed in panic, "Dan has been released." Hanjich jumped up, slamming his hand on the table, eyes wide. "What is happening?" He quickly opened the door and rushed outside. Everything before him left Hansik stunned. Players slowly emerged from the space gate. Amazement surged within him. "The truth is that the players have returned." Hansik gaped, cold sweat pouring out, which means the dungeon has truly been cleared in a day. Isn't that impossible? At this moment, the players were being checked for injuries by medical staff. He hurried towards them, joyfully exclaiming that everyone had returned safely, not seeing the figure he was hoping for. Hanshich hesitated, his eyes scanning the crowd. He scratched his head, his voice revealing confusion mixed with worry. "Why are there only 4 people? Where is Kim Gu-jin?" The crowd fell silent. No one spoke. Everyone's face was heavy eyes full of avoidance. Hanshich gently pushed up his glasses, his voice choked. "I see that Kim Gu-jin has unexpectedly—" A voice rang out from behind. His heart stopped. Hope surged within him as that figure slowly became clear. The crowd could hardly believe their eyes as it emerged from the glowing space gate. Kim Gu-jin stepped out, hands in pockets, with an oddly calm expression. Hansik was momentarily stunned before exclaiming, "Kim Gu-jin." He resolutely walked away without looking back, even once he hurriedly chased after him. "Wait, Mr. Kim Gu-jin." Joseph was astonished. He is still alive. How the hell did that bastard clear the dungeon by himself? Seeing Han Shich trying to strike up a conversation with him, jealousy surged violently within him. Joseph's face darkened jokingly. How did he do it? In his mind, a single thought emerged. Who is he? The following days, newspapers were filled with news of the global economic growth rate being negative for 4 consecutive years. The European Union proposed a 30% increase in rewards for players who cleared the American dungeon. The Special Act for Players was passed. Players were exempt from 10% income tax. Were the players' demands being met just like that? On the large screen in the city center, the host's voice echoed through the bustling streets, the ambition of players from around the world growing louder. According to the analysis results, only players can close the dungeon, leading to demands for privileges from players, especially in times like this. The Messiah Guild in South Korea had no demands whatsoever. The 5-story dungeon was wiped out, and the news anchor reported that the Messiah Guild was the first to conquer the 5-story dungeon, exclaiming that Lee Se-jun saved the world once again. He continued, after clearing the 5-story dungeon, the organization supporting the Messiah Guild Han Sung Group also recorded a surge in stock prices. Meanwhile, Joseph angrily pressed the phone off, grinding his teeth and cursing those damn Messiah people. He slammed the phone down on the table, grumbling that the news was all about them, and Joseph complained that now we were just being insulted as trash. Only caring about money, Ho Sung replied with a sneer. Why bother with this stuff? It's not just a 1 or 2 day issue. He curiously asked, forgetting about how the dungeon was this time. The guy snapped back. Don't mention that Kim Gu-jin because of that new guy's name. We almost got wiped out. Ho Sung was surprised, asking why. What's going on? Joseph raised an eyebrow, pointing to his head wrapped in white bandages. You see my head. It's because of that crazy guy. Ho Sung looked confused. If that's the case, then the rumor is true. The guy held his forehead in frustration, confirming that yes, he used the guise of a new player to grab items and dove into a group of goblins. Joseph continued, I had to rush in to save him. And that's how it ended up like this. Ho Sung exclaimed in shock. What the hell, that orc? If that's the case, you need to report it to the guild and demand punishment. The guy shook his head and sighed, fine then. Just consider it stepping in dung. It must be for money that he's acting like this. He was upset no matter how lacking he was, it shouldn't be like this. It can't be left like this. I have to go around here. So that punk can't keep doing this elsewhere. At the same time, in a quiet house, Kim Gu-jin's gaze was fixed on a photo hanging on the wall. He stroked his chin thoughtfully. Unlike the past, he couldn't rush to meet that Lee Se-jun. Kim Gu-jin set a goal for himself to build enough strength before attracting his attention, so he stood silently looking at the wall covered in photos and information. The overlapping papers with red strings connecting one to another formed a tangled web. Kim Gu-jin yanked a paper at the end of his connection with him. I'll start from there. Transitioning to a skyscraper, a voice filled with astonishment exclaimed the dungeon of the evil hunter Secretary Nam, hesitated, her voice full of worry. Could it be because of the recent rumors in the guild? Do you want to overwork yourself to salvage the image so you keep the rumor going? I don't really know much about that, it's just that I need money. Chairman Lee's gaze was fixed on the figure in front of him, his eyes deep and penetrating as if wanting to see through the other person, all because of money. He advised sternly, Kim Gu-jin, your life is very important. Money is good, but shouldn't you protect your life first? Chairman Lee suggested that if you need it urgently, you can borrow from the association's funds. Kim Gu-jin firmly raised his hand to refuse. No need, just arrange the time for me. I know how to handle it myself. In his heart, he guessed that they were probably spreading malicious rumors about him. On the contrary, that is good. Hunting alone is best for him. After Kim Gu-jin left, Secretary Nam quickly reported that the rumors about Kim Gu-jin were likely true. He crossed his arms and looked at the cold, desolate city. Rumors are just rumors, but it seems he doesn't know about them at all. But what about the state of the dungeon that Gu-jin intends to enter? He continued to explain that after a specialized team entered and was wiped out, no one had registered in the past month. Chairman Lee turned back. Who is this specialized team? Secretary Nam awkwardly replied, they are promising individuals from Park Yong-gwan's faction. What should we do now? He scoffed. Even promising members of Park Yong-gwan's faction can't handle this dungeon. And he wants to go in there alone. His life is already in danger. Feeling that someone was speaking ill of him, he immediately turned around. Chairman Lee's voice echoed, but perhaps he should first ensure proper backup. Kim Gu-jin sneered, if you want to kill a hero, then first... At that moment, his phone screen stopped at a name, Park Yun-wan. Kim Gu-jin coldly continued, I have to team up with the bad guys first. After that, he drove away. Soon he arrived at Chuncheon City Hall. As Kim Gu-jin got out of the car, a man hurriedly ran up to him. You are Kim Gu-jin, right? Hanzon's face was drenched in sweat, his voice full of suspicion. But did you really come alone? Seeing him silent and not answering, he secretly mocked his dirty personality, only caring about money, so he really couldn't find any teammates. After that, Han Do quickly led the way. Now please proceed into this dungeon right away. He glanced at the person beside him, muttering to himself, this crazy guy really intends to go in alone. Whatever, it has nothing to do with me. Live or die, it's his problem. The spatial door slowly opened, brilliant lights spread, illuminating the dark space inside the dungeon. As Kim Gu-jin stepped inside, the door immediately closed behind him. At that moment, the system displayed the information panel Hunter Orc Dungeon Level 1. Difficulty rank C, maximum number of entrants, 3 entry condition level 13 and below. The completion condition is to eliminate the orc hunters. He thought to himself, with his current level, this condition clearly means he can't attack alone. Kim Gu-jin swiftly drew his sword, his body tensed and alert. But if he could use the orc as a sacrifice to perform the skeleton soldier skill, everything would be different. In an instant, an orc appeared, darting towards him to attack. Kim Gu-jin frowned, his eyes flashing with a cold, decisive, and dangerous glint just as the orc's mace came crashing down. He nimbly slipped past its body, avoiding the attack accurately. Kim Gu-jin spun down to the ground to gain momentum and gracefully stood up, swinging his sword. The sharp beams of light emitted from the sword sliced through the air, striking straight towards the enemy, but the result was not as expected, leaving him stunned at the scene before him. Kim Gu-jin anxiously realized that even though it was an ordinary orc, its skin was very thick, so there was nothing but a scratch. He looked towards the stick it had just slammed down. There, the ground and rocks shattered into pieces, and in Kim Gu-jin's mind a thought emerged. What if its strength only reached that point? Then just one blow could send it to its grave. Even so, as long as he dealt with this one and summoned the skeletal soldiers, he felt full of hope that clearing this dungeon alone was not impossible. Kim Gu-jin immediately charged forward, attacking. The space around him seemed to slow down under his astonishing speed while the orc stared wide-eyed, its muscles tensed. Trying to catch sight of the opponent, it felt the moment was right and slammed its hand hard onto the ground, sending rocks flying and dust swirling. A piece of stone suddenly grazed past him. Fresh blood immediately gushed out. Kim Gu-jin quickly circled behind the orc, step by step, pressing straight towards the enemy, his eyes blazing with determination. Kim Gu-jin aimed directly at the wound he had just inflicted, swinging his sword down straight into that exact spot. He continuously attacked with sharp beams of light erupting around its legs. Everything happened so fast that the orc couldn't react, standing still and taking the hits. Moments later, Kim Gu-jin gently landed, his steps steady on the ground, his aura majestic. The orc stood there in agony, trembling all over, its eyes wide open in disbelief at what was happening. In an instant, dark red blood sprayed out, staining the space around him as he turned and walked towards the beast that had lost its legs and was forced to sit down. It raised an eyebrow, its eyes burning with hatred, staring intently at Kim Gu-jin, who raised his sword and growled. It was no longer something to be feared, was it? A precise stab pierced straight into the opponent's body. Blood spread across the ground as the orc collapsed dead without closing its eyes right after. The system displayed information: you have summoned skeletal soldiers. In the bright morning sunlight, it bathed the towering buildings in brilliance with electric signs strung across the sky. The bustling streets marked the beginning of a lively new day. In the office, two men were sitting, chatting their vehicle, praising the talent, truly a talent. Legina raised an eyebrow, showing suspicion. What was Chan so focused on? Don't tell me Chan is planning to bring back some strange business item from some corner again. The corners of his mouth slightly lifted, a soft laugh escaped containing amusement mixed with calculation as Chan tossed a stack of papers onto the table, pushing it forward. If you're curious, take a look at this. Upon seeing the words on it, he stared wide-eyed in shock. Regina gasped and shouted, "What is this?" He couldn't believe his eyes. A newly awakened player who hadn't been awake for long had actually single-handedly wiped out the first dungeon. He spoke with great interest, saying he heard that he had now entered the second dungeon. This time, from the moment he entered, he was all alone. Now, isn't that a slap in the face to the title of a newly awakened kid? Quite bold, isn't it? Legina pointed at the document, saying to Chan, "Can that be trusted?" When I first started, it was so difficult. Could Chan really believe in this dubious registration form? He continued, Chan is not that kind of person. But this time, Chan seems a bit naive. At this moment, Jisoo brought over water, his cold voice making Legina shiver. Is there a problem with my report? He was startled and turned back, his face pale with fear. Legina hurriedly explained that this report was drafted by Secretary Lee. No wonder it's so perfect. Where did you find this rare information? She slammed the water tray down on the table, splashing water, and coldly stated, "That's my job." Ji Jiang took a sip of coffee. The information was gathered by Secretary Lee, so it's 100% trustworthy. Before he could finish his sentence, his gaze landed on the coffee grounds in the tray. If we don't trust Secretary Lee, then who can we trust? Ji Jiang growled in frustration, also not trusting anyone. I told you I don't like instant coffee. Don't buy it again. Jisoo calmly enjoyed her coffee regardless of him yelling, "What is this all about?" She slowly opened her eyes, her face calm, a ripple of emotion passing through. Jisoo casually spoke. This coffee was brought to the meeting with the Phoenix Association last week. And this report is made from recycled paper. Ji-cha immediately changed his tone, gulping down a few sips and exclaiming, "This coffee is lightly sweet and really delicious." Indeed, when drinking coffee, one must drink instant coffee, the aura of generosity radiating around him as he spoke sincerely. It seems that in this world no one trusts Secretary Lee. Then who can we trust? Legina looked at him with disdain, sighing inwardly truly stingy and sly. His gaze was fixed on the figure in front of him, silently evaluating why at this age he still... Before long, the coffee was gone, leaving only a crumpled paper cup on the table. Ji Zhang suddenly remembered and asked, "By the way, Secretary Lee, how is the acquisition of the dungeon going?" She immediately reported, "There are a few dungeons that aren't too bad, but the prices are still too high, so I'm still looking into it." Hearing this, he couldn't help but be surprised. "Acquisition of the dungeon?" Legina wondered. "Aren't the dungeons we bought before still available?" His eyes lit up as if a big prize was in front of him. "What are you talking about? Now you have to go into the dungeon, so sooner or later you'll be short on time." He protested loudly. "What's going on here? I just came out of the dungeon yesterday. I need to rest a bit." Se-chan waved his hand dismissively. "A person who rests too much will become sluggish, and those who are working hard will feel even more sore if they suddenly take a break." "Se-chan, this is just a thought." Legina gritted her teeth. "What?" Jisoo picked up her coffee cup, the steam rising, gently fading into the air along with a heavy sigh. On the dungeon side, the orc horde howled threateningly, their eyes blazing with murderous intent as they crazily charged towards the skeleton soldiers. With just one swing of its bone club, it shattered. The shards flew everywhere and fell scattered to the ground. Kim Guji quickly cleared the orc sitting on their corpses, his gaze fixed on the bone fragments on the ground. Complaining that his skill level was still too low, so his soldiers were weak, Kim Guji swiftly jumped down to the ground, but... Then your hand immediately touched the corpse of an orc named Johann Josh, the King of Poison, whom I had faced in a previous life. It taught me a lesson that was nauseating at that moment as magic erupted in Kim Gujin's hand, weaving into the body of the monster, a blinding light radiating out, causing the orcs to panic. Not understanding what was happening, a moment later, the system announced that you had summoned a skeleton soldier right at that moment from the corpse of the orc. The flesh was suddenly torn apart. A bony hand unexpectedly burst forth, its teeth grinding together like a hunting machine that had just been activated in no time. The figure of the skeleton soldier appeared with great majesty, dark energy swirling around him, forming cold mist. He spoke in a chilling voice, if my magical power allows. Then the skeleton soldiers were assigned to me. His voice continued to resonate like the number of sacrifices present on this battlefield. Hearing these words, the orc group looked bewildered, their eyes vacant. They were completely unaware that death was looming, ready to pounce on them in an instant. The screams of agony filled the air. Spreading throughout the dark dungeon, the system continuously displayed that you have leveled up. All your abilities have increased. The skill of blood poison has risen to level 2. Kim Gu-jin sighed in disappointment, just that much. What? In the dungeon, only leveling up to that extent seems a bit weak. Now I have to quickly deal with these basic orcs and start looking for the orc hunter. He rested his chin on his hand, filled with questions. Kim Gu-jin focused on the dungeon map he had just drawn. He thought it was a creature that preyed on its own kind, so it would be the leader controlling all. He frowned, muttering to himself, but what if it was just blending in with the orc group? He pondered now the only remaining place was suddenly the skeleton soldier bent down. His gaze fixed on the drawing on the ground, Kim Gu-jin exclaimed in surprise, "What is this?" Seeing it staring intently, he curiously asked, "Do you see this and know anything?" Kim Gu-jin scratched his head in confusion. Could it really be like that? He told himself that anyway, he could roughly guess where the ORC hunter was located. Kim Gu-jin unconsciously stood up silently, calculating if it was there. Then there wouldn't be any that could be chosen as a sacrifice that the skeleton soldier could use. He lightly tapped the wooden stick on its head, his voice firm, "Only this one will do." After that, the two of them turned their backs and left to search for the special orc in this dungeon. Anyway, I have to think of more ways. After the battle, the stench of blood quickly attracted a flock of crows. Seeing the bodies of comrades lying scattered on the ground, the orc leader gritted his teeth, his eyes red with rage. A fierce roar erupted from its throat, causing the crows to panic and scatter. The orc leader bent down its rough hands, tightly grasping the head of a comrade and dragging it across the ground. The force of the pull was so strong that the wounds on the unfortunate one's face widened. Fresh blood splattered across the ground, creating a long streak of red like its eyes filled with hatred. In the damp, dark dungeon, the orc leader sat silently among the pile of its comrades' bodies that had just been dragged back. It tore into the warm flesh, greedily devouring it against the rocky wall. Kim Gu-jin held his breath, his eyes tense like a drawn bow fixated on the moving shadow in front of him. He tightened the bowstring in his hand, silently thinking. The boss monster in the dungeon has superior physical abilities compared to normal individuals. Attacking without calculating against these is foolish, he reminded himself, but as long as I can shoot a poisoned arrow into it. Kim Gu-jin nodded, signaling the skeleton soldier to attack without hesitation. It quickly left its hiding place, stepping straight toward the enemy. Upon hearing the noise, the orc leader immediately turned around. It snorted, its mouth wide open, revealing sharp teeth roaring threateningly. In an instant, the orc leader charged forward with a club towards the skeleton soldier. Gripping the sword tightly in his hand, he lunged at the opponent like a storm, swiftly swinging the sword with a face full of murderous intent. The orc leader hurriedly defended. The sound of weapons clashing rang out sharply. Its eyes burned red as it glared at the enemy. Suddenly, the orc leader bit down hard on the shoulder of the skeleton soldier, struggling to escape from the sharp teeth of the enemy. In the meantime, he raised his gaze firmly, believing that these bloodshot eyes indicated it was the orc hunter that preyed on its own kind. Kim Gu-jin aimed straight at the target. In his mind, a thought flashed. In the meantime, you raised your hand silently, certain that those bloodshot eyes indicated it was the orc hunter that fed on its kind. Kim Gu-jin aiming straight at the target. In his mind, a thought flashing. Moreover, it was the only place to shoot at other than its shoe leather. Each arrow flew from his hand as if guided by the thoughts in his head, the only weak point of it. It was like a lightning bolt racing towards the enemy, the orc leader realizing it too late with no chance left to evade it, staring helplessly at the arrow rushing towards him. In a blink, the arrow pierced straight into the orc leader's eye, knocking him backward. He quickly buckled his knees, trying to maintain his balance as his foot slid along the ground. Along with a cloud of dust, the orc leader stopped in an instant, his cold gaze fixed straight ahead as he hastily reached for the arrow embedded in his face. In a moment, the arrow was pulled out and fell to the ground. The orc leader, furious and panting heavily, glared at the enemy, and at that moment the system displayed a notification. The orc has been poisoned by blood poison. He frowned in thought. The weaker the point, the faster the poison spread. Kim Gu-jin smirked, his eyes full of smugness and sarcasm. His attitude added fuel to the fire, igniting the rage within the orc even more fiercely. At this moment, the system displayed a message stating that due to blood poison, the orc's stamina was continuously decreasing. The toxin quickly seeped into the blood, leaving the orc leader dazed as if drained of vitality. Seeing him collapse to the ground, Kim Gu-jin marveled at the damage of blood poison at level 2. It wasn't very high, but he smirked and continued. At this level, it's still quite worth using. Taking advantage of the orc leader still reeling, the skeletal soldier swung his sword. Kim Gu-jin coldly declared, "This is the end for you." In an instant, the blood-soaked blade struck the orc leader, who fell to the ground, his breath extinguished, ending his life. Immediately after, the system's voice rang out in rapid succession. Notification. You have defeated the orc hunter. You have wiped out the dungeon. You have leveled up to level 1. You can return after 1 hour. He lightly kicked the pile of bones on the ground, murmuring softly. It devoured everything, regardless of whether it was human or orc in this bunch. I wonder if there are any members of the Park Yong-hoon faction here. With that kick, the scattered bones rolled and clattered against each other like the echoes of the dead. Suddenly, Kim Gu-jin's gaze accidentally caught something. In front of him was a solitary skeleton, its ribs severed, protruding like a cold warning of death. Kim Gu-jin reached out to touch it. He was certain that this wound was not caused by the orc. He observed closely, silently, thinking that it seemed like a stab from behind the act of someone familiar with killing in the dungeon. In Kim Gu-jin's mind, the thought arose that he couldn't determine whether the killing was planned or just an impulsive act, but if it was the Park Yong-hwan faction of the Phoenix Guild, it could be a guy who simply kills for money and items. He sighed, realizing there wasn't much time left in this dungeon. Where could he find traces of him? The bright moonlight flickered through the dark night of the dungeon like a guiding lamp, igniting hope for Kim Gu-jin. To approach Park Yong-hwan, he just needed something sufficient to make an excuse. Then anything would do. Suddenly, a strange light flared up against the rock wall in front of him. Flickering in the darkness of the dungeon, he raised his hand and squinted at the dazzling light. Kim Gu-jin quickly moved closer to check, and it turned out there was a cave here. Kim Gu-jin crouched down carefully to observe inside the cave entrance just wide enough for one person. Right before him was a skeleton curled up in the orc. Still gripping the sword tightly, he silently affirmed that this weapon was very clean and the corpse was not damaged like the others, it seemed. Seeing the claw marks on the rock wall, Kim Gu-jin was even more convinced that while his teammates were being devoured, he had fled in here alone. Only counting the days, waiting for death, seeing the emblem on the cloak of the skeleton, his heart surged with contempt for those who could do such despicable acts. Indeed, it was a member of the Phoenix Guild. Kim Gu-jin smirked sarcastically, especially if he was considered a promising person of the Park Yong-hwan faction. Then the thoughts continued to arise in his mind. There was no grave more fitting than this place for him. Suddenly, from the skeleton's body, a notebook fell to the ground. Kim Gu-jin thought, "What is this?" He didn't hesitate and immediately picked it up. Kim Gu-jin quickly opened the notebook. It was a diary. He flipped through the pages quickly, murmuring that there seemed to be no valuable information at all. Suddenly, Kim Gu-jin's gaze stopped on one page, and he exclaimed in surprise, "This is the blacklist of the faction Park Yong-hwan Kim Gu-jin." Closing the book, his voice excited, finding this is indeed lucky. "I can use it effectively." The system sound unexpectedly rang in his ears. The Hell Envoy praised your brilliant achievement. He has gifted you the legendary skill. Gu-jin was astonished to hear this and immediately exclaimed, "Legendary skill." The corners of Gu-jin's mouth slightly curled up, so this is what was obtained here. He fixed his gaze on the paper he was holding. The content stated that the eyeball of Anubis conditions to receive the Hell Envoy skill from level 1 and above skill effectiveness. It is possible to see the memories of the dead. Upon reading the last line of the paper, Wu-jin sneered with satisfaction. He smirked and read the line aloud. "It is possible to see the memories of the dead." Then Wu-jin, without hesitation, seized the opportunity and decisively tore the paper into shreds. Indeed, such luck was not present in his previous life. After the paper was completely torn apart, at the same time, the system sound began to ring, announcing that you have acquired the eyeball of Anubis. You have achieved the title of the Inheritor of Hell. Gu-jin stepped closer to Yong-gu's skeleton. He sighed while carefully raising both hands, preparing to touch the skull of the dead, but couldn't say a word. Then Gu-jin's hands gently touched Yong-gu's dry skull. He slowly pulled it closer to himself, but his mood suddenly became excited. His eyes simultaneously emitted a strange light. "That matter has now become a thing of the past for me." The magic power within Gu-jin's eyes began to gather very quickly. Then they twisted into a fierce vortex, all the magic power deep within his eyes, gradually spilled out. At this moment, the system continued to ring with an announcement, "You have opened the eyeball of Anubis." Immediately, Gu-jin's magic power unexpectedly surged forth. In an uncontrollable manner, it shot directly into Yong-gu's eye socket. Following that, everything around was suddenly bound by the beam of light emitted from his eyes, and he swallowed all the memories of Yong-gu while he was alive. They all vividly appeared before his eyes. The screams echoed continuously in the ears of the orc. In the chaos, someone screamed, hoping to receive help from him, "Yong-gu, save me!" Faced with the cries for help from his teammate. Yong-gu not only did not help, but instead he gritted his teeth, showing discomfort. Damn it, Yong-gu did not hesitate to choose to abandon his teammates who were in a life-and-death situation. He just ran away. Yong-gu, the coward, could only curl up and run away, fleeing for his life. After a while, he fortunately found a small cave. Yong-gu, terrified, held his head and shouted, "I can't die here! Hunting people is illegal." The brutal images in his memories appeared intermittently. In the end, Yong-gu seemed to turn into a madman. He laughed loudly and shouted, "Soon that person will become the master of the guild." Phoenix indeed. Right after that, Yong-gu's memories were left with only one thing, the image of a man with fiery red eyes leisurely sitting on a throne. He shouted the name of that man, Park Yong-hoon. At this moment, all the dark memories of Yong-gu were seen through by Gu-jin. The black magic power was quickly absorbed back by his eyes. Gu-jin gritted his teeth, absorbing all of his memories. He tried to endure the intense pain being transmitted into his body through his eyes after he had completed the task of absorbing both the magic power and memories of Yang Jiwayu. The skull of that man had finally lost its value. Ujin threw it down hard onto the ground. He held his head, clearly showing pain as if he was not used to it. After seeing the memories of the dead, Gujin gasped. He exclaimed in astonishment, "Is this really the memory of the dead?" Gujin calmly stared at the skull lying at the feet of the orc. He thought to himself that seeing the past of others is indeed not pleasant at all, and it seems to consume more magic power than I thought at this moment. Satisfaction was clearly expressed on Gujin's face as he wiped the sweat off and silently calculated that the preparations were complete. If I approach him with the information I have from the past about this guy and the list I found earlier, even the most cautious person wouldn't stand a chance. The scene shifts to a grand building appearing against the clear blue sky, followed by a blood-soaked hand suddenly appearing in the stillness, the fingers still tightly clenched. Forming a powerful fist upon looking down at the ground, he saw a gaunt man lying flat, as if he were trying to suppress a terrible pain. The voice of Ion 1 rang out immediately after. "You let other players attack that dungeon!" The face of that man. Beaten to a pulp by the bodyguard, he fearfully shouted, trying to explain, I was wrong. Just in case of any mishaps, I will deal with that brat." Yongwan replied indifferently, "Deal with him. You couldn't even handle that new guy who charged into the dungeon alone. How could you?" He immediately turned to Secretary Kim, who was standing next to him. "Do you have anything else to add?" "Huh?" Secretary Kim, upon hearing Ion 1 mention her name, quickly bowed her head and apologized. "I'm sorry. I will handle it right away." Ion 1 remained relaxed, reading the newspaper that reported the discovery of the A community dungeon. Immediately, 2 bodyguards appeared. They forcibly dragged the man outside as he shouted loudly, "Wait, please don't kill me, just give me one more chance." No matter how much he pleaded, he remained calm. Yongwan silently read the lines written in the newspaper about the bidding competition for the A community dungeon. It allowed 150 players to enter. After a moment of struggle, the door to the room was slammed shut by the 2 bodyguards, and the man was finally dragged outside to face the consequences. Ion 1 slowly turned to the next page, the headline immediately catching his attention. "South Korea handles the A community dungeon with a level 20 player." He appeared surprised. A newcomer managed to clear the entire dungeon alone. This guy seems to have some decent strength. Although it wasn't a big deal, Yongwan was a bit curious, but the reputation of that guy in the guild wasn't very good. Secretary Kim next to him nodded and replied yes, then carefully recounted the entire incident that had occurred in the dungeon. He isolated himself from his teammates. There are rumors that he monopolized all the rewards, but this has yet to be confirmed. Young one, based on the information he just heard. Then he speculated that actually putting aside the doubts if his reputation in the guild was like that, it would be hard for him to succeed further. He couldn't keep acting alone forever. The phone suddenly rang, interrupting the conversation between the two. He coldly said, "Speak." The voice from the other end immediately rang out, "A person named Kim Gu-jin is looking for you and wants to meet." Yongguan couldn't help but burst out laughing upon hearing this. "Look at him, he has willingly walked into the tiger's den. This orc is quite interesting indeed." Scene change, a serious voice of a secretary suddenly rose during the bidding for the one-layer dungeon this time. "Our Phoenix Guild has been assigned a total of 20 dungeons. This arrangement has been relatively satisfactory for the guilds, but..." He carefully reported the situation he had gathered. Currently, the 3 factions, including Park Yongguan's faction, are engaged in a fierce mental battle to compete for those 20 dungeons. The secretary, feeling helpless, presented what had been giving him headaches for many days. The biggest issue is, even if each faction is allocated 6 dungeons, there are still 2 dungeons left over. The chairman slowly spoke up, stating that with 3 factions, there are only 2 dungeons left over. It really is a headache. The secretary's face showed some annoyance as he gently nodded and replied, "Yes, that's why we still haven't reached an agreement." The secretary pushed his glasses up with one hand and analyzed seriously, because if it's Dungeon A, the chance of obtaining valuable items is quite high. Moreover, it's a one-layer dungeon, so the chances are even higher. The chairman raised both hands to support his chin, sighed in frustration, and replied, "No one is willing to give in. Everyone is so proud of their abilities. If only we knew what items were in which dungeon." The chairman quickly found himself in a deadlock because he couldn't think of a solution. He loosened his tie in annoyance, truly a headache, and wondered aloud, "Is there no individual not belonging to any faction willing to enter those 2 dungeons?" The secretary quietly replied, "No, not yet." The chairman knew that was obvious. He leaned back in his chair and casually remarked, "That's right, who would dare? If any faction just barged in, who knows what could happen in the dungeon, just at that moment when he was unsure of what to do." An unexpected notification bell rang. "It's a call from Mr. Park Yong-hoon." Upon hearing his name, the secretary's expression immediately darkened. Park Yong-woo. The situation is already very tangled, and now he calls. What could it be? The chairman slowly picked up the phone and said, "I'm listening." His expression suddenly changed. The chairman suddenly shouted, "Ah!" He couldn't hide his surprise on his face. The chairman immediately stood up and carefully asked for clarification. "Kim Gu-jin, what do you mean?" The secretary was a bit surprised to hear that name. Kim Gu-jin. He tried to maintain his composure and replied, "First, I understand. If there's anything, I'll get back to you." The secretary couldn't help but be curious after seeing the chairman finish the phone call. He immediately asked the chairman, "What was that about?" The chairman calmly recounted Yong-won's proposal. He requested to assign one of the 2 remaining dungeons to Kim Gu-jin without letting the other factions know. The chairman carefully analyzed that Kim Gu-jin is, after all, someone with a bad reputation and always acts alone, and said that the other factions don't pay much attention to him. The secretary showed clear curiosity. "So now Kim Gu-jin has joined Park Yong-gwan's faction." He bowed his head and sighed. "How would I know? Maybe he's just being used for this dungeon and utilized as a pawn." He pushed up his glasses and slowly voiced his thoughts. "If that's the case, what about the other dungeon? If we do that, then perhaps the factions will fiercely compete to take over that remaining dungeon. The chairman already has a plan." He calmly explained that if we hand over a dungeon to Kim Gu-jin, then Park Yong-gwan's side will withdraw and stop competing, so we only need to deal with the other 2 factions. The chairman calmly sat down, resting his chin on his hand. He is a brilliant strategist. I didn't expect him to prepare even the chess piece Kim Gu-jin. Right now, he has many unresolved issues in his mind that need clarification. He might even record this concession as a debt, and later he will demand the rightful benefits. But speaking of which, who exactly is Kim Gu-jin? What is his relationship with Park Yong-gwan transitioning to Secretary Kim, who is confused by Yun-hwan's decision? "Master, how could you just accept Kim Gu-jin's proposal like that?" Yun-hwan calmly replied that he brought that here and suddenly made a proposal, so I find it interesting, especially since no one else is available. And above all, he was smiling wickedly while speaking. A person like that, we can take advantage of him. If we no longer need him, we can discard him like a chess piece, and that's it. Isn't that right? Time suddenly rewound 1 hour earlier. Gu-jin brought a notebook to meet Yong-won. He slowly picked it up, glanced through it, then turned to ask you, "Do you know what this is that you brought here?" Woof Woof calmly replied, "Yes, I wanted to find out what it was, so I looked at the contents inside." He tilted his head, looking at you with a puzzled expression. "So why did you come here? Are you planning to come here to demand money to keep this secret?" He lowered his head, the corner of his mouth slightly curled up just with this. Yong-gwan's expression suddenly darkened. He looked up at Gu-jin with a cold gaze that could intimidate Park Yong-gwan. "Do you think so?" The 2 bodyguards behind you prepared to take action. Gu-jin immediately spoke up to clarify that it was not a threat, but I came to make a proposal. Gu-jin very straightforwardly said, "The 1-layer A dungeon has become a hot topic recently. I want to attack it." Your words just came out, causing Yong-won to pause for a moment. Then he quickly regained his composure, unable to hold back a laugh. He raised the notebook and pointed it straight at Gu-jin. This guy is really funny. After a hearty laugh, Yong-won's expression suddenly became serious. He cautiously asked, "Do you know what that dungeon is like that you dare to say that?" Gu-jin casually scratched his head and indifferently answered his question. "Yes, I know that the dungeons are fiercely contested by most of the associations in the country, including the Phoenix Association and the Messiah Association. Besides the designated dungeons, there is always fierce competition for more." Yong-won confirmed again, "You know that. And you still intend to charge into that battlefield. Next." He suddenly slammed the notebook in his hand down on the table. "You must have lost your mind." Yong-won smiled wickedly, nodding in agreement. "Fine, I will meet your request. But I also have a proposal." Transitioning to Kyungbu University, Gu-jin sneaked into a lecture by an expert analyzing the situation inside the dungeon. He projected a data chart onto the large screen behind him and loudly pointed at it. "If we look at the content of the dungeon report, we all know that." He projected a data chart onto the large screen behind him and loudly pointed at it. "If we look at the content of the dungeon report, we all know that. In this dungeon, there are at least over 1,000 orcs. The content was displayed on the large screen in great detail. The orc boss population level 1. Orc boss attack condition, hunt 1,000 Orcs, and the orc boss entry condition below level 20. Maximum number of entrants, 150 people. Mission reward, eliminate all 1,000 ORCs. The orc boss hunter Wu Jin bowed his head silently, pondering for a moment as he stood in agoric, recalling everything that had happened before returning to the past. The number of survivors in this attack was. He stood silently, leaning against the wall, reflecting, trying to remember, although he couldn't recall the exact number, but around 7 people, a little over half of the players, had perished. Gu Jin rubbed his chin, analyzing. The players chosen for this position were all elite soldiers from various regions. Considering this, if it were just a battle with monsters, there's no way more than half of the players would have died. He stared intently at the expert who was lecturing at that moment. Because there wasn't enough evidence, there was no way to just let this go. But Gu Jin's expression immediately became serious. He was very confident in his reasoning. No matter the situation among the players, there was a high possibility that some had developed murderous behavior because it was a good opportunity to reduce the number of competitors and loot items. Gu Jin quietly turned and left that meeting room. And in this dungeon, he remembered exactly that the highest value reward would be given to the one who eliminated it. The orc monster boss was the fangs of a Rottweiler. Gu Jin also clearly remembered who that reward belonged to. The result of the reward belonged to the guild with the most contributions, the Messiah Guild. He vividly remembered the image of June receiving that reward with an incredibly radiant face, now recalling his expression back then. Gu Jin felt something was off. At that time, he knew nothing, but now thinking back, there were many forced things. Who knows, perhaps from that moment that Brat had already become corrupted. He slowly pushed the door open and stepped outside. Gu Jin walked alone down the hallway, continuing his reasoning based on the anomalies he had discovered. Even if Lisa Jun was behind that incident, it didn't necessarily mean that the Messiah Guild acted directly. Gu Jin squinted, using all his brain power to uncover the truth. It couldn't be ruled out that they had planted spies in other guilds based on his memories to guess their next moves. So now Gu Jin slowly stepped out of there. In his heart, it seemed he had found the answer. Perhaps it was a scene change as the players began to gather into many groups in the middle of the street, the lights flashing continuously around them. A voice suddenly rang out, pulling everything back into the right trajectory. Now the players were entering the dungeon. The surrounding space was surrounded by enthusiastic fans. They continuously cheered, flashing lights, taking pictures of the players preparing to enter the dungeon. A total of 4 guilds participated in this game. Each guild chose a symbolic color for themselves. The first guild, the Messiah Guild, all members wore elegant white suits. Next was the second guild, the Phoenix Guild, whose members chose bright red suits to represent strength and majesty. Then came the third guild, the Lion Guild. They chose yellow suits combined with black shirts inside, creating a fierce aura just like a lion holding its head high. Finally, there was the School Guild. They donned black suits paired with matching masks, further emphasizing the mystery of the members of this guild. Wu Jin stood silently amidst the crowd, slowly following behind the players from the other 4 guilds. He was the last to enter the dungeon. Then he slowly removed a hooded Gucci hat, revealing a sinister smile from his fangs, saying, "The orc you want to claim will be taken for you." In just a moment, all the players entered the dungeon one after another, and a flash of light enveloped the entire forest, shrouded in darkness after they entered the dungeon. 2 members suddenly got lost from their guild. The girl looked around in confusion and asked, "Where's our guild?" He sighed and tilted his head, saying it was too crowded to find them. Zhong Qi suddenly shouted, "Messiah Guild, line up in front!" As soon as he called out, all the guild members immediately took their positions and lined up neatly in front of the other players. One player among them at another guild, after witnessing the scene, exclaimed that, "Indeed, Messiah, look how quickly they are forming their lineup." "Truly impressive," the man standing behind him said, with a hint of annoyance, not to praise aimlessly like that. Han slung the sword over his shoulder and slowly moved forward, sneering that even if they started first, it wouldn't make a difference with at least 1,000 orcs ahead. Han then pointed in another direction and shouted to announce the orc over there, just as the other members stood confused, staring at this orc, when suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed. Breaking the tense atmosphere, Jack bravely ran quickly towards the orc, leaping directly in front of everyone. Jack glanced at the orc. Then he ordered the remaining members of the Messiah Guild to handle it. Everyone stay alert. Immediately, the sound of the system unexpectedly rang out. The warrior's skill was activated and the monster was provoked. The shield in Jack's hand emitted a wave at the same time. The loud noise attracted the attention of the orc. Upon hearing the loud sound, it became alert and turned its back. The orc immediately activated its berserk mode, raising its fist and charging at him. Jack quickly used his large shield to block its attack, using all his strength to hold the shield firmly as he tried to stand his ground on the rocky surface. After the powerful impact from the ORC, its expression suddenly changed, and in its eyes flashed a look of surprise. Jack sneered, looking at the orc with a cold gaze. Is that all? Elena stood aside, observing her eyes and hands suddenly emitted a strange light. As she murmured a spell, countless large vines suddenly sprouted from the ground, wrapping tightly around the orc's arms and neck. The system announced another message. The skill of the one who holds the root of knowledge, the monster has been immobilized. Elena continued to shout the spell loudly. The light emanating from her grew stronger, and the vines around the orc's neck tightened. The orc thrashed violently, gripping the vines wrapped around its neck, its eyes filled with despair as it screamed in pain. Its painful cries tore through the silent atmosphere. A sudden surge of power rebounded towards the other members, the force shifting from the air to the ground. It continuously stirred up the ground beneath the players there. They panicked and shouted, "What is that, an earthquake?" A man immediately stepped forward, pointing towards the forest and explaining that it wasn't an earthquake. Something was in the forest behind. After hearing his words, everyone turned their gaze toward the direction of his pointing arm, feeling immense fear, holding their breath as they gripped their swords tightly. They prepared to engage in battle at any moment. Suddenly, from within the forest, more than 10 giant orcs charged towards them. One of the leading orcs launched the first attack, aiming directly at a member of the Phoenix Guild. He smoothly drew his sword and slashed several times. A stream of dark red blood immediately gushed out as his sword cleanly cut into the orc's arm while other players rushed in to fight. The orcs seemed to go mad, charging like arrows towards the players, and everything around instantly became chaotic, one side humans and the other side frenzied monsters. Engaging in battle with each other, the Messiah Guild did not fight with brute force. They stood outside the fray using magic to control the orcs, while all the players present became increasingly excited. Their minds gradually became more exhilarated as they saw the orcs being controlled by the Messiah Guild, and all the remaining players simultaneously gripped their swords and charged in. It was at this moment. Then the shouts immediately echoed everywhere. Everyone shouted in unison to advance. All the players in the same guild began to cooperate, working in harmony to take down each orc. No one noticed the presence of Gu Jin standing alone on a large branch nearby. Gu Jin carefully observed everything happening. Indeed, his disappearance went unnoticed by anyone. Gu Jin suddenly broke into a sinister smile. Now it's time for me to act slowly. Kim Gu Jin calmly stood high observing the battle and thought to himself that it wasn't far from the players yet. Then he quickly moved with a purpose. At this level, he could locate the boss orc that just zoomed past, silently calculating that the condition to clear this stage was to eliminate all 1,000 orcs. And the boss ORC of the guilds, to minimize human casualties, would first reduce the number of ORCs according to what Kim Gyu Jin knew when 1,000 orcs were defeated. Only then would the real journey officially begin. Finding the boss hog, a cunning smile full of scheming spread across his face until that moment. That was the time limit he had to achieve the reputation of the boss hog, while at the same time in the ORC's hideout, an orc knelt in the middle of the great hall before the ORC leader. The orc did not say anything, but stared intently at the guilty one with sharp eyes, blood flowing from the mouth of the guilty orc, while a huge sword was raised. A thud echoed as the head of the guilty orc was severed, its head rolling in front of the other orcs, causing them to be extremely frightened. At that moment, the orc slammed his hand down on the armrest. He stood up simultaneously, holding the axe in his hand. Then he roared, followed by the responding roars from the subordinate orcs. After a warning display from the orc, the subordinate orcs began to return to the battlefield, a scene that made Kim Guji Noob, observing from a distance, feel admiration. Handling the orcs wanting to retreat from battle was indeed good. Now his gaze turned toward the orc that must be the boss orc, right? Although it seemed stronger than he thought still, a feeling of pride surged within him. It was indeed lucky that he encountered it just as it was urging its subordinates to the battlefield, watching the large orc sitting alone on the throne. Kim Guji realized the opportunity had come to him. While all the others were busy fighting head-on, he had a plan with a joyful smile on his face. He had to attack the boss orc, which was currently alone, returning to the battlefield. After defeating a good number of the ORC army, several members of the guilds were feeling smug. They loudly declared that orcs were nothing to be afraid of. He just needed to advance. Unlike them, Jong-ki was very serious, believing that the number seemed less than expected. There must be a main force present. At that moment, someone unexpectedly appeared beside him. It turned out to be Henry, who quickly reported the situation he had scouted. "Sir, a large number of orcs are advancing towards this way." Jong-ki hurriedly asked how many approximately. Henry solemnly informed that according to his estimate, it was around 900 to 1,000. It seemed like the entire force was coming. This statement confirmed Jong-ki's initial thoughts. Indeed, without hesitation, he loudly commanded everyone to advance and finish everything today. To confront the main force, we need to reorganize our ranks. However, in response to his enthusiasm was the displeased attitude of those from various guilds. "Excuse me, are you giving orders to someone?" From the crowded group, Ronan from the Leong Guild stepped forward and loudly declared that they were not the servants of the Messiah Guild, they would just attack as they pleased. Nevertheless, Song-ki still tried to persuade these stubborn people. Right now, a large number of orcs are marching towards this way. The competition between the guilds is important, but if we do not unite, he concluded sternly in this dungeon, all of us could end up losing our lives. Unfortunately, Ronan did not listen and even mocked, asking if he was not confident enough. "If you are afraid," then he glanced at him and contemptuously said that you shouldn't have come here in the first place. After saying that, he led his group from the Leong Guild forward. Henry saw this and couldn't help but sigh that those people had lost their minds. To avoid wasting more time, Jong-ki quickly ordered us to find a safe place to rest for a bit and prepare for the next battle. At the same time, Kim Gu-jin's skeleton soldiers had been summoned, and he was currently with 2 of his skeleton minions preparing for a 3-on-1 against Lotto, who suddenly found himself facing 3 unknown foes. Lotto was a bit confused, but then he stood up and prepared to fight with all his might. Kim Gu-jin and his minions quickly got into a tense state, ready to clash with Lotto. At that moment, the 2 skeleton soldiers charged forward without hesitation. Lotto immediately activated his Fang skill just as the 2 skeletons were about to reach him. Suddenly, he glanced at them and swiftly shattered one skeleton with a powerful strike, leaving Kim Gu-jin astonished, exclaiming that it couldn't be possible. Back to Lotto, he charged fiercely toward the remaining skeleton. Of course, that skeleton was not afraid at all and growled back unexpectedly. Lotto swung his axe toward the skeleton. But unfortunately for him, that skeleton skillfully dodged the attack. However, with sharp eyes capturing every moment, Lotto easily landed a blow on the skeleton, causing Kim Gu-jin to realize that the skeleton soldiers couldn't hold out as long as he thought. So he decided to use the arrow in his hand, aiming his bow at Lotto. There was only one chance. He had to seize this moment. It was now as the last remaining skeleton attracted Lotto's attention. Just as Lotto swung an axe at the skeleton, Kim Gu-jin released the arrow. Lotto quickly sensed the danger approaching him, not expecting that at that moment, which seemed impossible. Yet he was still able to dodge. This left Kim Gu-jin somewhat astonished. How could it evade a monster much stronger than what he had heard before? At that time, the skeleton approached closer to one of Lotto's legs, then swung its sword to strike Lotto. But instead of injuring Lotto, the sword in the skeleton's hand shattered into pieces. Before Kim Gu-jin's astonished and panicked gaze, Lotto raised his axe and brought it down on the skeleton. A loud crash echoed as the skeleton's bones scattered everywhere. Kim Gu-jin watched Lotto's fierce demeanor before him and could only exclaim that if this continued, it would be tough. At this moment, he had no choice but to revise his plan. Looking at the fang around Lotto's neck, Kim Gu-jin hesitated to attack immediately, knowing that facing the Orc King's fang head-on was nearly impossible. Therefore, he quickly decided to retreat. At this moment, retreating was better as he had little mana left. Thinking it, he hurriedly turned to run, but something strange happened that he couldn't understand. Why wasn't he chasing after him? Suddenly, Lotto moved, making Kim Gu-jin think he had changed his mind. No looking at Lotto's slow movements made him realize that it meant chasing after those cowardly guys would waste a lot of calories. This made him somewhat satisfied. Perhaps it was true that the dungeon boss was different, but this was good. He could run away with peace of mind. As he accelerated his escape, he confidently declared, "But when I meet you again, you'll regret letting me go." While Kim Gu-jin was running, his figure caught the attention of some members of a certain guild hiding in the shadows. Who was that? Ronald misunderstood Kim Gu-jin as a member of the guild and was bitter, thinking that it wasn't just the Lion Guild that had chosen not to participate in the battle. At that moment, Ronald's close subordinate quietly speculated that their leader might have found the orc leader before them. Ronald pondered, saying that it might indeed be the case, but it could also be not. Moreover, that guy contemptuously exclaimed that there were no hints to guess whether he returned because he found the Orc leader or not. No one could tell. Don't trust any of those bastards unless you see it with your own eyes, even though he himself is not strong. This guy's greed is extremely large for the loot dropped by the dungeon boss. The A rank must belong to the Lion Guild at any cost. Suddenly, Ronan's subordinate became unusually deceitful, and then that guy unexpectedly fell down along with others in the guild, leaving Ronan stunned and unable to react in time. He panicked and shouted, "What the hell is this?" Immediately, he entered a state of tension and thought, "What the hell is going on?" I have never heard that a type of monster that is not an orc would appear here, but suddenly red eyes emerged from the darkness and stared. Van On stared so intensely that he was scared to the point of anger and realized this was not a monster. However, he still shouted loudly, "Who the hell are you? Show yourself. Do you think you can just run away and be safe?" The fate of such people is to return to the heavens. At the same time, in a cave illuminated by fire, Kim Gu-jin had safely gathered with members from other guilds. He looked around to check and felt reassured that it seemed no one was paying attention to him, but when he saw everyone's sad faces, he felt a bit puzzled. But what kind of atmosphere is this? It's like accidentally walking into a funeral. After that, his gaze noticed many graves had formed, making him wonder why so many had died on just the first day. Kim Gu-jin's expression was filled with curiosity because he didn't understand what had happened. Something was wrong since only elites could enter here, and they were all heavily armed. Could it be that the guild started fighting earlier than expected? Suddenly a quarrel broke out. "Why do you all look so ragged?" On the other side, it was no different. A member of the Tai Hu Guild, full of confusion, asked, "Our Tai Hu Guild is still doing well, by the way. Do you have any information about the other guilds?" A member of some guild spoke up, saying that according to what they heard, it seemed the Lion Guild suffered the heaviest losses. A group went into the forest to gather loot but disappeared completely. The members of the guilds began to chatter animatedly. It wasn't just one or two people who went missing. That's scary. It could also be that the bodies have been so deformed that they are unrecognizable. The snails also eat human flesh, and they talked about not wanting to be eaten by orcs, only to be reprimanded by the captain. "Damn, I may die, but I don't want to become food for monsters. Don't curse like that, it's bad luck." "Yes, I'm sorry, Senior," sitting in front of the burning fire. A member's voice rang out. However, saying that was one thing, but it still felt too strange. A member had a question, wondering if it were normal there should still be some corpses left somewhere. Or they could have run away. But then they would die from severe injuries, right? The person next to him agreed, replying, "You think so too. Hopefully among the missing there is someone who survived." Kim Gu-jin still sat far away, quietly listening to these people talk to gather more information. Just let it be. We should still keep our lives first. Once dead, even good items are useless, right? The information from their mouths makes you confused. This is an A+ dungeon, so this could happen, but entire groups being wiped out in one day is unusual. Not normal at all. The presence of another enemy lurking out there makes you feel uneasy. There is definitely something shady, and our plan might fail if the overall military strength weakens. Tomorrow is going to be very busy. The sun has risen, and the snail army is still diligently marching. Their numbers are extremely large, which terrifies the members from various guilds. How can there be so many of them? There are complaints mixed with curses. No matter how much we kill, they keep pouring in. Shut up and focus. That guy. A coalition army of guilds fighting against the orc army. An orc roars loudly, and then the battle between the two sides breaks out fiercely. The commotion from the battle catches Kim Gu-jin's attention. It seems to have started. However, you don't care much about that because you're busy looking for something to deal with the ORC, but this side is the problem. I can't land a fatal blow on the leader. With what I have moreover from yesterday's battle, you also realize that using the sea skeleton warrior as bait won't work. They are too fragile. Suddenly you remember something. Speaking of which, do sea skeleton warriors know how to shoot arrows? So you decide to summon a skeleton warrior to test it. After summoning the sea skeleton warrior, Kim Gu-jin returns to the orc. Seeing it still lounging on the throne, you can't help but exclaim, "You look so comfortable today." So you decide to make it uncomfortable. Let's go for round 2. Go. As before the orc activates the King Orc's Fang skill, its power increases exponentially. A loud bang sounds as it leaps and charges toward Kim Gu-jin. Just as the orc is about to attack you, something suddenly flies toward it, startling it a bit, but it quickly raises its axe to block. The arrow falls to the ground after colliding with the iron axe. The orc's furious gaze darts toward the one who shot the arrow, and that person is none other than the skeleton warrior. Angry at being ambushed, the orc throws a rock at the skeleton warrior, but fortunately the two skeletons quickly dodge. Dodging while continuing to shoot arrows, each arrow flies toward the orc, but it can still block them. Just when it is busy dealing with the skeleton warrior Kim Gu-jin, who doesn't know when he got there, is right above it, so the sea skeleton warriors do know how to use bows and arrows. A triumphant smile spreads across your face. The plan is going smoothly. Kim Gu-jin leaps high. Just as he prepares to land on the orc's head, it begins to sense danger, but all actions now are too slow. Kim Gu-jin delivers a downward strike to the orc, simultaneously severing the fang of the king orc that it wore around its neck. The moment the fang falls to the ground is also when Kim Gu-jin quickly catches this treasured item he has longed for. The power begins to transfer to him, who has received the fang of the orc at the same time. The various powers of the orc boss begin to decline. The physical damage of the orc boss decreases, the defense of the ORC boss decreases, the agility of the ORC boss decreases. Suddenly, the ORC boss collapses. Fortunately, Kim Gu-jin dodges just in time, otherwise he would have been buried under a pile of rubble. The reason the orc boss suddenly collapses is that an arrow poisoned its leg. The orc boss has been hit with blood poison, and the culprits are Kim Gu-jin's two skeleton warriors. The current situation makes you extremely complacent. Now I've taken its fang, the attack has worked. The Fang of the Lord of the Orc has additional information provided by the system. The Fang of the Lord of the Orc is a legendary item requiring level 1 or higher. This is the Fang of the Lord of the Orc. The Fang of the Lord of the Orc has immense power when equipped. It grants 30 physical damage, increases attack power by 5%, and physical defense by 5%. Increases damage by 10% when attacking orcs after learning the uses of this precious item. Kim Gu-jin did not hesitate and decided to use it immediately. Now there is only one thing left to do. Instantly, the system informed that you have equipped the Fang of Lato. A smug smile blossomed on your face as you equipped your weapon, gently stroking your blood-stained sword and declaring, "Let's take your head down, heading towards Lato OC, which is currently busy fighting fiercely with two skeleton soldiers. One skeleton soldier seizes the opportunity. It focuses and shoots an arrow at it, which makes it furious and roar loudly. Lato OC goes crazy, swinging its arms wildly to knock away the arrow shot at it. Suddenly, its eyes became filled with confusion. It turns out it had been hit by an arrow right in the belly. Immediately, the system informed that the OC boss has been poisoned. Unexpectedly, someone's shadow dashed past. Kim Gu-jin suddenly appeared right behind Lato Orc. As soon as it saw you, it furiously charged to attack. However, you easily dodged and jumped onto its hand. Your whole body was suspended in midair, and then you flipped in the air, taking advantage of that moment. One hand of Kim Gu-jin tightly grasped the sword hilt, while the other pressed firmly on the sword's tail. Quickly, you drove the sword into the hand of Lord Ox. The system quickly displayed a notification that the Ox boss has been poisoned, realizing it had been hit by your skill. Lord Ox looked at you with a gaze full of resentment. Before it could counterattack, Kim Gu-jin swiftly chopped off its axe, and you broke into a delighted smile. The axe you are using flew straight towards a skeleton soldier. It seems this was part of Kim Gu-jin's plan, and the skeleton soldier did not dodge at all. On the contrary, it displayed a ready expression, quickly catching the axe, initially looking at the axe with a puzzled gaze, but then it suddenly threw away the bow in its hand. This skeleton soldier seemed extremely excited with the new weapon in its hands, which made Kim Gu-jin quite satisfied, affirming that it was the perfect weapon to take your life. At the same time, elsewhere, someone had safely landed on a high branch. He looked around in confusion and wondered what that sound was. Usually, orcs don't make such sounds. After thinking for a while, he decided to head towards the source of that sound. With that thought, someone was fighting the orc boss nearby. The discovery that someone had fought the boss before made this person a bit angry, muttering to himself, "Damn it, who is it? I must quickly find out and report back to the guild." So he sped up, and when he got out of the dense forest full of tall trees, this person quickly landed on a rock outcrop far away. The scene he saw before him left him speechless. It turned out he discovered Kim Gu-jin along with two skeleton soldiers. They were playing cat and mouse with Lotto. Two skeleton soldiers, one player. He could only see one player like this. Made him a bit confused, trying to squint to find another figure, but saw no one else. He didn't see any other players around here. Therefore, he was quite surprised, mixed with confusion, unexpectedly seeing only Kim Gu-jin challenging the orc boss alone. How could that be? At the same time, it made him fearful and decided to report to the guild immediately, thinking that made him quickly turn around and leave. But one thing this person did not know was that Kim Gu-jin had discovered his presence all along while he was rushing back to his guild. Suddenly, there was an arrow embedded straight into his back, causing him to panic and exclaim about the arrow, but no matter what. He could no longer run and fell to the ground, the ambush leaving him confused and looking around, wondering what was happening and who did this. He remembered Kim Gu-jin in a panic, thinking that he couldn't have been discovered. It was him. He was preventing him from reporting that he was fighting the Fox boss. Suddenly, a glow appeared beside him. He had to glance at the figure that appeared from nowhere. This person was none other than a member of the school guild, looking at the unfortunate man with a murderous gaze. The man himself was horrified and recognized this person. It was the school guild. Before he could utter another word, he was dealt with. The young man from the school guild stood calmly in front of the corpse of this unfortunate man, and he had permanently departed, disappearing after killing that man. The young man from the school guild carefully crossed his name off the list and took inventory of the remaining targets, noting there were 5 more left. He looked at the pile of people he had dealt with on the list. He couldn't help but complain about the effort wasted on hunting orcs. During that time, going PK was better than nothing. Suddenly, from a tree, another member of the school guild loudly reminded this young man, "Listen here, rookie, half of that guy's loot will belong to me. Make sure to divide it properly." The young man below, tired of hearing this, replied, "Got it, you don't have to worry." Then suddenly asked, "By the way, are you really going to kill that guy from earlier?" The senior member of the school guild casually replied, "He's not on the list, but if the opportunity arises, I still want to kill him to loot." The young man from the school guild was worried, thinking that he was. "I'm going to take on the orc leader, so isn't it just like dealing with a monster? Isn't it too dangerous?" However, the senior member insisted, "Once we deal with that orc, he'll be finished right. At that point, taking him down will be as easy as pie." After saying this, the person left saying, "I'll finish off the rest. Just follow me." The young man murmured, "What else is there to deal with?" Then he picked up the body of the guy he just killed and decided to drag it away, tossing it towards the orcs. They would take care of it for him. At that moment, someone stepped out from behind a large tree in the forest. It was none other than Kim Gu-jin, who had eavesdropped and observed all the actions of the school guild members. Returning to the battlefield with the orcs and the guild members, they had wiped out the orcs that were hundreds of times larger than themselves. Han looked at the scene before him, feeling quite pleased. The progress seemed faster than he expected. Just then, one of his subordinates spoke up, saying that at this rate they could finish this dungeon early. "All right," Han said, enthusiastically agreeing. "But from now on, we don't need to get too close, and if we get the chance, we should gradually fall back from the formation." This statement made his subordinate a bit confused. "Yes, leader." An arrogant thought flashed in Han's mind. The rabble was about to be cleared out. So starting tomorrow, everyone will begin to go after the orc leader. The guy laughed triumphantly and ordered to prepare for the main event right at that moment. Suddenly, the system screen appeared before the players. Han was startled by this. A line of red text appeared with the content stating that you have defeated the orc leader. This made Han unable to believe his eyes, and exclaimed while the others were so astonished that they shouted loudly, "What the hell is this?" Everyone told him to check his eyes. He didn't know which dead body he was looking at while receiving the notification. He was bewildered as to how this could happen. The main forces of the guilds were all gathered here. Henry, beside him, curiously asked the leader what was going on. Like this. "Does it mean that the Lion Guild members who left earlier succeeded?" Jong-ki shook his head and replied, "I won't mention it again." His eyes filled with suspicion. "I think this Lion Guild group only has a loud mouth towards Lotto. Its axe is now stained with red blood." The skeleton army successfully used the stick to hit the back of the man, using Lotto's axe to send it back to the sky. At that moment, Kim Gu-jin received another notification that he had leveled up. He received the achievement of defeating the OC leader. The reward was a skill scroll. Seeing that he had an additional skill, he was curious to check if there was a new scroll, hoping it was something useful. Upon seeing his new skill, he was so surprised that his eyes widened. This was an unexpected skill sent to him, the Death Notebook, a skill of rank E. The notebook contains the power of Osiris, capable of holding 5 monsters under the effect of the souls of the dead, sealed within the Death Notebook, receiving the power of Osiris. Increases all abilities by 5% after reading the function of this skill. Kim Gu-jin immediately thought of another skill of his, but the two had one difference. This one was like a bag, but meant to hold my monsters. Moreover, those that were put in here would gain a little strength to test how powerful this was. So he decided to do it right away. Saying it, he quickly stored 2 skeletons into the Death Notebook. The power from the notebook surged, pulling the two skeletons inside. Even Kim Gu-jin had to grit his teeth to hold the notebook tightly in his hands. A thunderous explosion occurred. Lightning crackled, dust flew everywhere, making Kim Gu-jin exclaim dramatically. Looking at the 3 words, Orc skeleton, written in the notebook, he felt somewhat satisfied. From now on, he wouldn't need to kill the first one anymore. Just entering the dungeon would allow him to summon soldiers right away. A triumphant smile spread across his face. With this, the biggest weakness of summoning skeleton warriors was a thing of the past. At the same time, in the forest, a group of people was moving faster than ever. It turned out to be Han's guild. The fact that he dove headfirst towards the orc made his subordinates confused, asking the leader where he was running to since the orc leader had been defeated. Frustrated by their constant questioning, he turned around and shouted as if I didn't know his close subordinates heard this but still couldn't help but wonder why So Han had to explain. He spoke loudly, explaining why he had to rush towards the ORC's location, like that the fool should at least go there to see the situation to report back. Just like that, if I go back and tell Mr. Park Yong-guk, do you think I will be whole? The subordinates. As soon as they heard this name, everyone was filled with fear. Park Yong-guk's outcome made the whole group run faster than a fleeing soldier towards Lotto's location towards the guild school members. They had no idea that things would progress so quickly. Damn, I didn't expect the orc leader to fall so quickly. Therefore, the leader decided to change the plan. Just ignore the one who soloed the ORC leader. He had to handle the targets on the list. First, one of the group members hearing this questioned. But what about the new soldier left behind to clean up? But what about the new recruit left behind to clean up? The white torque in the group sighed in annoyance and replied, I told him to follow right after he finished. After this mission, we need to go back and teach him a lesson. The leader didn't hesitate to remind the group of what they needed to do. If their identities were exposed, their superiors would get into trouble, and they had to avoid that at all costs. And in the worst-case scenario, be ready to log out. Given the current situation, he had to quickly urge his subordinates. Now there isn't much time left, but we still have to act as secretly as possible. At that moment, he suddenly sensed something. Wait, someone is coming! Looking back, he saw it was the new guy in the group. The way he was running made everyone panic. The new recruit, what is he running like that for? The answer came immediately when behind the new recruit were 2 skeleton warriors chasing him. The white torque quickly recognized the sea warrior. In his mind, he silently lamented. Is he provoking that guy? At that moment, the new recruit ran straight towards the gathering of the school group. His actions made the white torque furious to the point of shouting. You bastard, are you crazy? What are we supposed to do if you lead them here? Then he hurriedly asked the leader for advice on what to do now that the new ORC soldier had exposed us. In a situation where they were about to be discovered, the leader quickly thought, did that guy decide to attack us because he knew something? If we waste time here, other groups will come to this place. Right then, they were definitely dead. Even if they had to abort the mission, they had to kill this guy and erase the traces. While he was busy thinking, the new recruit suddenly pulled out a sword. At the moment, the leader turned around to ask his companions if everyone was ready. The new recruit had already sent them on their way. The white torque fell to the ground with a fatal slash, and the others were not much different. The current situation was that the school group was all wiped out. Only the leader and the new recruit remained, which surprised him to the point of wide-eyed wonder, what the hell is this? The new recruit betrayed us. Suddenly, the new recruit removed his mask, revealing that he was not a member of the school group, but Kim Gu-jin. Seeing the arrogant expression on his face, the leader was so shocked that he exclaimed, this guy is... Returning a few minutes earlier, Kim Gu-jin's sharp gaze was directed at the new recruit of the school group. It seemed he had realized the reason for the reduced number of players. This is the reason why only half of the players returned alive after checking a few memories of the new recruit from the school group. He felt a bit disappointed because he couldn't find what he needed. But in the memories of this new recruit, there was no information related to the Salvation Guild. Then Kim Gu-jin's gaze turned to the one the new recruit from the school group had dealt with. He quickly recognized that in his previous life, that guy was also just put on the missing list. Without thinking much more, he quickly stripped everything off the new recruit and put it on himself, deciding, it seems I have to go meet the Skull Guild leader in here. He intended to search for the information he needed, but before doing that, he needed to deal with the orc first. If lucky, he might find information about the relationship between the Skull Guild and the Salvation Guild. But before that, he had to deal with the orc leader. Back in reality, the leader looked at Kim Gu-jin with a bewildered and confused expression, wondering who the hell this bastard was. Where did he crawl out from? The members of the school group were looking at the skeleton warriors with fear, watching the two of them lumbering towards them. The school group was so scared they shouted to get out. As for Kim Gu-jin, he felt quite satisfied with the full presence of this group. I have luck again. All the names in the memory of the new soldier are gathered here. While the two skeletons are busy intimidating the school soldiers, Kim Gu-jin is busy suppressing the leader who won't play cat and mouse with this group anymore. The skeleton growls and raises the axe high. The school soldiers, seeing that scene, panic and scream not to do it, but even begging is useless because sooner or later they will be sent to the altar. The school leader is terrified by Kim Gu-jin's ruthlessness. This bastard shows no hesitation when it comes to killing, meaning this is not the first time he has done so. Although scared, he still bravely says, "I don't know who you are, but you won't get anything from me," knowing he can't fight Kim Gu-jin, so he decides to play it risky with his words. "Even if I survive and escape, I will only become a hindrance for the leader. This is the only way left." Thinking of that, the school leader draws his sword and decisively ends his own life. His action surprises Kim Gu-jin a bit. After regaining his composure, he sarcastically says, "That's quite a move." But it's useless anyway. Looking at the school leader's expression, he suddenly feels wrong. He should be thanking him instead, as he just proved he knows a lot of valuable information. To save time, Kim Gu-jin immediately activates Anubis's eye skill. Memories emerge at a house blending with the sound of flowing water. It's someone's conversation. The global changes will be an opportunity for the Japanese Empire to take a big step forward. The voice comes from a room hidden in the house. "We will cooperate with the Salvation Society to build an organization to expand our influence." Two serious men are sitting at a table discussing. Hayato is not silent. CEO Jun come to Korea to join the Skull Society and contribute to the homeland. Among them, there is a man whose face is unclear, persuading the other, "If we can seize the dungeons and items of both Japan and Korea," he is promising Im Seong-jun, "we will build a more powerful empire than ever before. It will be called the Yamato Empire." Just then, two men unexpectedly appear at the door, and the mysterious man introduces them as Im Seong-jun. "Now I will introduce those who will guide you. The angels of Japan will help us establish Yamato." I am CEO Jun is astonished and hesitantly exclaims, "You are—" Upon seeing the two enter, he was so surprised that his mouth fell open. Then he hurriedly bowed and loudly greeted, "It is a great honor to meet you both." In his heart, he secretly marvels at not believing he would meet the leaders of the sword and bow here. Returning to the earlier memory of the school leader, he is asking his subordinate about a guy they need to deal with when the dungeon broker appears. What kind of person is he? After that, he is informed about a dungeon broker from Korea Suwon who is quite something. But recently he has been obstructing the Japanese broker. We must deal with him at all costs. Then a name is called. It seems Korea also has a broker who is quite something. What is his name again? Osei-chan. After checking and gathering the necessary information, Kim Gu-jin drops the body of the school leader to the ground and shows disdain. "I was hoping it wouldn't be like this, but it seems it can't be. I must say it's truly disgusting." He grits his teeth in anger and hatred. "Even in the darkest moments, we still trust and fight together." The familiar images of Noda Hajime and Sukahara Ken appear in his mind, the sword leader and the bow leader. Both of them are the same. In the previous life, according to Kim Gu-jin, I remember before returning I had conquered many dungeons, and you always looked at those two with admiration for saving the world, always standing at the forefront. I want to be like them. To you, they are the ones who ignite passion. They are not only teachers, but also a spiritual support for me, and they are the ones you trust the most. They are precious teammates I can trust with my life. You have always believed in them in any circumstance, but now everything is no longer the same. Even in the fiercest battles, I still thought like that. At this moment, Kim Gu-jin has learned about all of them being on the same side as Lee Si-jun, and now you are determined to ruin all their plans. This time I cannot let them do whatever they want. Just now the next target is On-si-chan, right? You mumbled a dungeon broker. The fact that this person named On-si-chan was assassinated makes you think he is on the priority assassination list. Then he must be very talented. It seems you are about to deduce something. In the previous life, I heard nothing about him, which means the assassination was successful. If this Yamato group replaces him, what benefit will Lee Si-jun gain? And then you decided to look for some clues to investigate. As long as he is still on the assassination list, the assassin will keep coming like moths to a flame. Perhaps I will find some clues to weaken them further. You are also planning a double attack, and I am holding a broker to find dungeons for me. So it's convenient for both sides, now that the work here is done. Prepare to leave the dungeon. In the real world, there are a few people in the car talking to each other. Is the senior always this quiet around the gate? The one called Senior found that question quite ridiculous, so he responded somewhat dissatisfied, saying that monsters cannot crawl out of the gate, so of course it has to be quiet. But once the dungeon is completed, this place will be chaotic. Get ready, so you should rest a bit, young junior. Upon hearing this, the junior was surprised, saying that when the dungeon is conquered, everyone will rush in to interview the players. The senior still calmly replied that this is not a stupid reason, but rather that the players fight each other to compete for items. This statement surprised the junior to the point of shouting. They fight each other like that. The senior tiredly explained that outside the Rescue Association, everyone will try to find ways to get as many items as possible. Anyway, when that time comes, you should sleep well. There's still a long way to go before resting. Suddenly, the junior pointed somewhere and stammered, "Senior, look over there." Seeing the subordinate talking too much, the senior angrily shouted, "Why is this brat so annoying?" The junior remained confused, mumbling about the gate, and so the senior also looked in the direction the junior was pointing, and both saw Kim Gu-jin covered in blood stepping out from there. They were so shocked that they shouted, and the players immediately appeared, rushing to provide first aid for Kim Gu-jin, a conquered dungeon, prioritizing those who were injured first. The noise made Kim Gu-jin feel uncomfortable as players began to come out and bring stretchers quickly. On another side, two gangs were preparing to clash, but no one knew the reason. "Senior, there's a scuffle over there." What the hell, the situation is worse than last time. A few days later, news from that day was everywhere in the newspapers, political, economic, and social news world news, 31 people dead, news that no one survived from the Skull Association. Everyone is dead. The newspaper asks who defeated the Orc leader. The reward for the dungeon has disappeared and conflicts erupted among the members of the associations. This news made someone extremely angry to the point of crumpling the newspaper. Yongwan gritted his teeth and exclaimed, "I can't find the bastard who defeated the Orc leader. What the hell is going on?" The newspaper was placed on the table with the headline asking who defeated the ORC boss. An angry voice echoed in the space. "Now you want me to believe this?" The guild member knelt on the ground, forming a straight line. Ronan looked up, promising, "I apologize, sir, for this unexpected incident. I can't guarantee that this won't happen again in the future." The man Yongwan bowed his head and squinted, asking, "How do you plan to compensate for the time and money I invest in you as well as my disappointment?" He leaned both arms on the table, his words dripping with threat. "This is not a charity organization where you get endless chances." Yongwan gritted his teeth tightly and issued an order. "In 1 week, you need to bring back 5 times the investment here. When I give you a chance, you need to seize it," he said. From inside the villa, a voice filled with panic echoed outside. 5 times? After Ronald's group left, Yongwan turned to ask the person standing next to him, "Kim Gu-jin, is that guy being treated in the hospital?" Secretary Kim quickly replied, "Yes, they said he was injured in the dungeon this time." Upon hearing that answer, Yongwan frowned and turned back indeed. "No one should be usable after being injured in a single-layer dungeon." Secretary Kim hesitated, slightly denying that. "The injury in the dungeon wasn't caused by a monster, was it?" Yongwan slowly glanced at her. "What do you mean? Are you saying he was attacked by players from other guilds?" "Is that information accurate?" Secretary Kim began to analyze. "If we have time, we could investigate to see what's true. But I think it's better to trust his words." Yongwan stood up from his chair, slipped one hand into his pocket, and walked toward the door. "Let's go to the hospital." "That guy isn't stupid enough to go out and spread rumors everywhere, right?" Secretary Kim ran after him and replied, "Yes, I told him to keep his mouth shut." On the other side in a hospital, someone spoke up instructing, "Kim Gu-jin, take care of your recovery well." Nam Sang stood outside the corridor, bowing to the person in the patient room. "And if you remember anything, contact the guild, okay?" He turned and walked away, scratching his head, letting out a long sigh, lamenting, "This is troublesome. Why can't I remember anything? How am I supposed to report this up?" Arriving at the elevator door, the screen above displayed the down sign and the current floor number was 4. Nam Sang looked up thinking, if it's like this, then why does Park Yongwan's faction request Kim Gu-jin to participate? As he stepped into the elevator next to it also opened. Yongwan, accompanied by Secretary Kim, stepped out, noticing Nam Sang. The two of them approached a patient room. Before Secretary Kim opened the door, Yongwan commented on his judgment. Looking at the expression of the guy who just passed by, it seems Kim Gu-jin knows how to keep his mouth shut. The door to the room was pushed open by someone else, making Kim Gu-jin pay attention and glance over there. Yongguan entered the hospital room and asked how his body was doing after such a long time. Kim Gu-jin did not answer him. He only whispered in his mind about the clear white liquid dripping from the IV bag into the plastic tube. Kim Gu-jin sat on the hospital bed recounting that he had almost no information about the people from the school group, but from what he heard, it was indeed suspicious. He recalled the things he had seen. I have confirmed that they participated in the attack on Boss Hog. Kim Gu-jin glanced sideways and continued that being completely wiped out meant that the items had been taken by another force. Several details from the past battle flashed in his mind. Kim Gu-jin added one more thing. The last thing I saw was that they used stealth. The silent hunter Yongguan sat on the chair beside the bed, speculating that if it was a stealth technique, he knew very well that it could completely conceal the person performing that technique. So it was very useful. Indeed, they were just targeting players and the boss. Kim Gu-jin lowered his head, his gaze becoming contemplative. Yes, if it weren't for the blood poisoning technique, I might have lost my life there. The attacker, if not for their deliberate poisoning. If my blood had flowed out, perhaps now I would be... Yongguan, hearing his words, remarked that you are indeed lucky. Anyway, the school group has been wiped out. So no one else knows what you witnessed, Kim Gu-jin asked him. Even so, I still have to be cautious for a while longer. But what about our Phoenix group? Haven't we gained anything at all? A look of displeasure appeared on Yongguan's face as he clenched his teeth thinking about that matter. I'm getting furious because of those school people. This time we only suffered losses. He rubbed his chin silently, planning that this incident could not be overlooked, even if it's just to compensate for the losses. We must bring the school group to light. What I learned from Kim Gu-jin is more useful than I thought. Yongguan slammed his hands on the armrest and loudly asked, I know now, what do you want? Kim Gu-jin seemed not to understand and asked back, what do you mean? What do you mean? Yongguan stood up from the chair. You should stop pretending to be innocent. He turned around and asserted confidently that because of the deal with me, you must have been monitoring the players and informing me, but surely you must have some conditions. That's why you told me so much information. Kim Gu-jin was silent for a moment, then parted his lips to directly state his request. If so, I want to find someone one-on-one. Feeling a bit confused, he asked for more details. Who do you want to find? Kim Gu-jin asked back. Do you know about the broker Ose-chan? I have heard rumors that this person is very capable, but my connections are also limited, so... Yongguan glanced, repeating the name he just heard. Ose-chan, how do you know that person? Never mind. In the near future, if you receive a strange call, just answer it. He and Secretary Kim turned to leave. Unexpectedly, he exclaimed a cryptic remark about an arrogant person choosing clients, but the ability is indeed to be acknowledged. Yongguan stopped his steps, moving forward, using a warning gaze towards the person sitting on the bed, continuing to say, and the last thing is just to say, just in case. But you absolutely must keep this matter confidential. If the rumor is leaked, only you will be in danger. Kim Gu-jin tilted his head, looking at the back of the person standing at the door, replying, Yes, I understand. The door slammed shut just before Ion 1 and Secretary Kim left. He even left behind an appointment. See you later. Kim Gu-jin merely bowed his head in silence, his feet dropping from the bed to slip into the slippers on the ground, mentally calculating. First of all, everything was going according to his plan. They had no suspicion of him at all. Park Yong-ho knew nothing about the connection between the school association and the Messiah Association. Kim Gu-jin stood by the window looking outside, thinking that if he started digging for information in that direction, Lee Se-jun, or the Holy Sword, would be watched by Park Yong-hwan. The corners of his mouth curled into a satisfied smile. Park Yong-hwan was completely unaware of the wounds he had inflicted on himself, so he would have to struggle in a short time. While Park Yong-hwan and Lee Se-jun were outsmarting each other, he could focus on developing his own strength. A black car with bright headlights was speeding down the road. A voice came from inside saying that although the scale of the school association was very large, there was no investment business group behind it, so there could only be one possibility. Yongguan sat in the back row, looking at the screen of the phone in his hand, thinking that exporting items obtained domestically would inflate the investment amount. He observed the images of red arrows on the map, formulating a plan. We need to find out about the black market connected to foreign countries. If we go there, we can meet the merchants trading with them. Yun-wan shifted his gaze outside the car window. This matter would eventually come to light. Getting involved with businesses that are in cahoots with them. Today, Kim Gu-jin walked out of the hospital. He put his hand in his jacket pocket, searching and wondering if it was time to get in touch with him yet. Just then, the sound of a call rang out. Kim Gu-jin took out his phone, silently praising the timing. He pressed the phone to his ear and a voice came through. "I heard you want to trade with me. Why?" Kim Gu-jin narrowed his eyes, realizing this was Oh Se-chan. He replied, "Yes, I want to find the dungeon. Se-chan set the condition that we must know your abilities. Then we can decide." Kim Gu-jin asked him, "You mean abilities?" Se-chan did not explain, but only said, "I will send you the details in a message." Then the call was cut off by the person on the other end. Kim Gu-jin also saw a message sent to him. The content of that message was, "Clear out the Koban's quantity, 1 floor difficulty C, plus maximum number of players entering 4 entry condition below level 28 condition to eradicate 100 Kobans. Location of the dungeon Songbi District, Incheon, Gyeonggi City." After reading it, Kim Gu-jin confirmed that they told him to choose a client. Even though it was a 1-floor C+ dungeon, using it for testing would be very helpful if the trade went through. At the same time, in a bustling neighborhood in the city on the side of a high-rise building, many colorful signs were hanging in the room. Lee Gina pointed at the phone curiously, asking, "Hyung, which poor soul is it this time?" The man sitting across from her replied, "It's just another new client application." Park Yong-won introduced and gave that phone number. Lee Gina bowed her head, closed her eyes, and let out a long sigh. "Hyung, how did the last situation go, and why are you like this again? If this time it's an attacker wanting to take your life, what will you do?" The vehicle owner confidently declared that it was no problem with the average folks. Even sending a truck wouldn't do anything. Legina leaned back in her chair, worriedly reminding that working under Park Yong-gwan would make them even more aggressive. The vehicle owner denied his speculation. If it were under Park Yong-gwan, he would handle the transaction himself. He walked over to the desk and pulled open the drawer. If he couldn't pass the test, it wouldn't matter because anyone wanting to kill me just needs to have the right skills. The vehicle owner dropped the phone he was holding inside, smiling excitedly. If he had such skills, the phone fell hard among a pile of different phones. His voice echoed, saying that one day he would break all the dungeons and could end this game. What we need is someone like that. Lizina's face lit up happily as she gave a thumbs up, asking why he would say that. That's really heartbreaking. If there's someone like that, it's right here. The vehicle owner bluntly remarked that you still have a lot to improve, and Legina couldn't believe it, exclaiming, "What about me, Hyung?" He assessed that you were the type to just survive, so if you attacked the dungeon alone, it would be too much. Se-chan smiled with interest, saying he had already set the test as the Koban dungeon. "So let's see what the results are." Legina shook her head, squinting and asking, "Koban, isn't that a bit much?" Se-chan calmly replied that it wasn't mandatory. "So if you're not confident enough, you'll probably give up." Legina clasped her hands behind her head, closed her eyes, and looked up at the sky, lamenting that Hyung had no intention of doing business at all. But did Hyung forget that I expend energy quickly? I'm starving to death right now. Se-chan, hearing this, angrily cursed, saying he had just ordered food and was about to eat. "And now what nonsense are you talking about?" Meanwhile, on the other side, a light yellow car was slowly approaching a giant pit. Inside the pit was a dungeon gate. Kim Gu-jin calmly stepped out of the car. After firmly closing the car door, Kim Gu-jin turned to observe the surroundings, wondering if they weren't planning to make money from their dungeon. He didn't set an easy challenge since he used such a massive dungeon for ordinary players. As he slowly slid down the pit, he thought to himself that it was only difficult for those who didn't know how to deal with the old lady. Nearby, a pair of binoculars was held up to Jisu's eyes, reporting the situation. She was standing near the dungeon at Songbo Yusan. She lowered the binoculars and glanced at her phone, reporting to the person on the other end. "Kim Gu-jin is approaching the dungeon over here." Jisu's voice transmitted from the phone's speaker to the ears of the two people in the room. She started pressing the button. The vehicle owner jumped, looking at the device making noise. Had he arrived there already? He picked up the phone that was on the table and asked the person on the other end. "Indeed, a hurried person, so what has he prepared?" Jisu replied, looking as if he hadn't brought anything special. Se-chan gritted his teeth, unsure whether to call him reckless or foolish. Lizina looked up and asked, "Isn't he just a madman in the end?" Se-chan merely huffed without saying anything. Legina disdainfully said, "But who knows? Maybe he doesn't need to prepare anything at all because he is overly confident," Se-chan continued. "He could be like that," he thought to himself. "But if that confidence is just empty bravado..." At a well-known Japanese-style restaurant, someone sighed. It seems that the rescue meeting is only going this far. In a room, a voice rang out, "Don't say that." "Calm down." Kim Jae-hoon of the rescue meeting waved his hand, analyzing, "You know how difficult it is to predict what will happen in the dungeon. Because there are too many chaotic factors, coming back empty-handed would be quite unfortunate, but at least there are too many losses. The person sitting opposite repeated the two words he just heard. Not many. Noda Hajiro asked seriously, "My 5 disciples have died, and you say the losses are not many?" Kim Jae-hoon was slightly taken aback by his attitude. Stammering, he denied, "No, I didn't mean that." Sukahara Ken, sitting next to Noda Hajiro, had been silent until now, but finally spoke up. "Lisa June probably knows already, right? About our relationship with the Skull Association. Isn't that why when it comes to the dungeon, he handed the task to us first?" Kim Jae-hoon was stunned, silently cursing himself for saying the wrong thing. Sukahara Ken, in front of him, continued, "Of course it is impossible to predict what will happen in the dungeon." He frowned and asked, "But are you saying we should believe that? That something like an orc can handle our people?" On Kim Jae-hoon's face appeared panic upon hearing them declare that this could not be easily overlooked. Immediately, he pressed both hands down on the floor. Respectfully bowing his head to the two of them, "I sincerely apologize. I should have thought more carefully before saying such nonsense. Please give me a little more time. I will definitely investigate thoroughly." Sukahara Ken smirked, taking the wine bottle from the table. "No need for that. We have already started investigating ourselves." "Don't be so tense. Have a drink or something." Kim Jae-hoon narrowed his eyes as if he had realized something in his words. He raised his glass as Sukahara Ken poured wine into the glass Kim Jae-hoon was holding, while explaining, "Although this happened, we are still allies with the rescue meeting after all. I just want to show you how Sukahara Ken's gaze exudes a threat. We feel offended." The wine poured into the glass increasingly spilled over. Flowing straight down onto the table, Sukahara Ken glanced down at the table. "We are comrades after all. If there is a conflict, we just need to sit down and drink together a few cups." He suddenly asked a question full of implications. Isn't everything forgivable? The hand holding the wine glass of Kim Jae-hoon began to tremble, causing the wine inside to ripple. Noda Hajiro had left the room first. Sukahara Ken followed him, only leaving behind one sentence. "Of course, if we are still comrades." Kim Jae-hoon remained in the same position, holding the wine glass, dazedly responding, "Yes, that's right." The door of the room was forcefully pulled shut, leaving Kim Jae-hoon alone in the room. He gritted his teeth silently, calculating that he had been too complacent before the leader. Dao and the sword leader must think of a countermeasure right at the restaurant's entrance where a black car was waiting. Noda Hajiro asked the person on the other end of the phone, "Have you finished handling it? What about the damage to Feta?" He just heard the information reported from the other side and replied, "Okay, I got it." Once seated in the car, Suzuka Ken turned to the person next to him and asked, "Is it as we suspected?" Noda Hajiro crossed his arms and admitted it was true, not due to any name on the assassination list, meaning it wasn't among those with good skills. "It has been revealed that his next target will be the Phoenix Guild, leaving only us." Sukahara Ken pondered, "If the culprit is not on the assassination list," Noda Hajiro added, "then he belongs to a faction we are not aware of and is intentionally hiding his strength for some purpose." Elsewhere, the evening sky was covered in a dark blue near the dungeon. Cowboy Song Po Dong was in a high-rise building with Bun Pun putting his hands in his pockets, speculating. "Players entering the dungeon today, we should be able to relax for a few days, right?" Zhu asked while sitting on the sofa. "What are you talking about? He went in there alone." He was extremely confident in his prediction and said, "I haven't seen any player still conscious. That guy will die soon and the gate will open again." Jum had just added a few more words when suddenly from the pit behind him, a powerful beam of light shot straight up into the sky. Bunpun pointed towards it saying, "You're spot on." Jum turned around in confusion. "That's not it." The beam of light from the pit gradually faded away. He stared at the scene before him. That was when the dungeon had been conquered. Bun couldn't believe it and exclaimed, "What? What are you talking about?" Yum quickly took the binoculars and raised them to his eyes. "That dungeon can't be completed even with the maximum number of people." Bum Pun reached out to pull him and called out, "Big brother." Yum lowered the binoculars, displeased, and asked, "What are you doing? We need to find out where the completed one is." Bum Pun gaped, pointing in a direction. "I think I found him." He pointed at the yellow car speeding down the road. Zoom saw that car getting further away and felt despair. He shouted, "It's over!" At the building filled with signs in the city, a loud voice rang out. "What you said you lost track of him!" Shay Trung angrily shouted into the walkie-talkie. "If you've received the money, then you should do it properly." "Taking my money to mess around and now making excuses?" Jisoo sat at the computer desk on the other side. She had to tilt her head and tightly cover her ears. She calmly called out to the person on the other side who was incessantly cursing, "Hey, boss," with an annoyed tone. Jisoo told him, "I haven't paid them yet," as she stood up from her chair and asked him, "Did you tell them they are your fellow countrymen?" The boss asked back, confused. "But we decided to pay them." Jisoo insisted, "No, they just came to help us." The boss crossed her arms and confirmed once more, "Really?" Jisoo looked at him seriously. Instead, the boss said he would treat them to a round of drinks. The boss shrugged and made up a reason to avoid feeling regret because starting today she would not drink anymore. Jisoo slung her bag over her shoulder and walked towards the door. If it were Kim Goo-jin, she wouldn't have to worry about leaving now. Trong felt curious about where Secretary Lee was going. She didn't answer, but only said that if he intended to work with us, he would contact us soon. Trong followed the figure of the person who had just left with her eyes. A cold remark flashed in his mind, conjuring an image of Jisoo tightly hugging a lonely backpack sitting on the ground. Recalling it was around this time last year that he met the girl, Lee Gina returned with a pile of items from outside. "What's wrong, Big Brother Secretary Lee? I told you to eat something first before going, but you just ignored me," Trong said as she sat down on the chair, closed her eyes, and thought to herself that it was probably because she had something to do today. A second later, he opened his eyes again, glancing at Lee Gina and Kim Goo-jin. They had finished dealing with the dungeon. And it only took half a day. He had potential. But when he saw the pile of items he was holding, he got furious and cursed at that damn guy. "How much money did you spend on that convenience store?" Regina calmly chewed her food and said, "Come on, big brother, don't make that face." Trong ordered, "Do you want to die? Return it to me right now." Regina used her charm to plead, "Don't be stingy with the food, big brother, come on." Kim Goo-jin's yellow car had driven to a section of the road with a sign. He was sitting in the driver's seat, resting his chin on one hand, frowning and lost in thought. Earlier, after conquering the dungeon, Kim Goo-jin climbed out of the pit and walked towards his yellow car. When he arrived, he saw something on the hood. A walkie-talkie and the piece of paper appeared. Kim Goo-jin raised an eyebrow and picked up both items. Back in reality, he reached out to touch the object on the passenger seat, the walkie-talkie. He wondered if he was going to play with it. The note read that if he returned from the dungeon, he should contact them using this walkie-talkie. Working hours are at 9 in the morning. Remember to be on time. Kim Goo-jin praised this guy. He was pretty good. The red car parked right back in the parking spot under the basement. The headlights flashed blinding light. Inside, Kim Jae-hoon pressed both hands on the steering wheel, sweat dripping from his face, silently cursing. He couldn't just show up in front of the leader like this. An image of a person flashed in his mind, and he wondered if he really had to ask Jang Ji-hoo for help. The phone lying in the compartment shook, the screen lit up, accompanied by a ringing sound. Kim Jae-hoon pressed the phone to his ear. He asked the person on the other end, "It's me, Kim Jae-hoon. What's going on?" Suddenly he shouted, "The Skull Gang!" The red car quickly drove out of the parking garage. Kim Jae-hoon spoke to the person on the phone. "I got it. I'll be there right away over at Yongguan Bar." He smirked, ordering to resolve the issue quietly, as always. It was best not to explain the reasons. "John Huney, you're sitting across from me," he replied. "Yes, I know. Have you talked to the person I need to protect?" Youngwon answered, "Not yet. But now that I've discussed it with you, it will be soon." Hearing the response, John Huney decided, "Then I'll explain the situation to my subordinates as well." Youngwon agreed with his arrangement. After all they needed to do was keep him alive and help him get out of there. "I will take care of the rest." The two of them did not notice that on the second floor, a figure had appeared silently observing them all this time. Kim Jae-hoon stared down at the floor below, wondering what Park Yong-hoon was planning. He wondered how much he knew about the Skull Society after all this time. Suddenly, a man approached from behind, asking, "I have the same question." Park Yong may have extensive connections, but to know about the Skull Society is quite rare. A smirk appeared on his lips as he raised a question, claiming he needed to know more about the Skull Society for work purposes. But he also mentioned some strange things. Earlier in a closed room, Man had met Yong Hwan. He leaned on the table and declared that even if it was Mr. Park Yong Hwan asking him to share information about the Skull Society would be a bit difficult. Yong Hwan, sitting across from him, responded, being more cautious than usual. With that, his expression was filled with confidence as he asked, "What if I said I know the secret about the dead skulls in that dungeon?" "What then?" Back in reality, Kim Jae-hoon couldn't believe it. He gasped, confirming, "Did he really say that?" He bowed his head, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, thinking to himself that if that were true, this was no longer a problem he could solve on his own. I would also get into trouble if I reported this to the leader. Kim Jae-hoon turned to look down at the person talking to Park Yong-gwan, wondering who he was. Man crossed his arms and introduced the identity of that person, Jung-hoon Young. He had many business dealings with Park Yong-gwan. He also directed his gaze at Jung-hoon Young, sitting below, adding some more information about him. He was the type of mercenary who did not belong to any society and would take on any job as long as the pay was right. At that moment in the seating area below, Hoon Hyun had respectfully bowed his head to see Park Hyun-won off. Meanwhile, on the upper floor, Kim Jae-hoon said to the person beside him, "Thank you very much for cooperating with the Salvation Society and sharing this information." Jongman calmly replied, "After all, the Salvation Society has done me a favor." Finally, Kim Jae-hoon just bowed his head. His face wrinkled and remained silent. Below, Jong-hoon Neon returned to sit in his previous position at that moment. Kim Jae-hoon approached him and extended an invitation. "Let's talk a bit." Jong-hoon Neo looked up, realizing he was Kim Jae-hoon from the Salvation Society. Kim Jae-hoon also sat down on the bench opposite, his hands clasped together. "I don't know what you heard from Park Yong-won, but I have a proposal for you." The man spoke seriously about a business related to cooperation with the Salvation Society. Jong-hoon smiled, pretending not to understand, and asked again, "What are you talking about?" "Can you make it a bit simpler?" Kim Jae-hoon's eyes flashed with sharpness. "I'm talking about a highly profitable deal for you, and you still don't understand." "Then this will take time." Elsewhere, a black car had stopped behind the white line on the road, waiting for the red light. Inside, Secretary Kim sat in the passenger seat, reporting the situation to Ion-1, who was sitting in the back seat. "I managed to secure a public dungeon as you instructed, but it seems your method this time is not like usual." She wondered, turning around. "Wouldn't things get more complicated if you got involved yourself?" Yong-wan, resting his head on his hand, did not look at her but kept his eyes glued to the phone screen. "Wouldn't everything become more complicated if you got involved yourself?" Yong-wan rested his head on his hand, not looking at her but fixated on his phone screen. "The Skull Club must take action, because we have caused such a commotion, and perhaps in a hurry and disorganized." He saw the name of the caller on the phone. Displayed as Kim Gu-jin, he asked if the time, location, and supporting actors were ready. "We just need to set up the stage for the main actor, right back to the bar." Kim Jae-hoon sat alone at a table near the entrance, biting his nails, silently wondering what Park Yong-hoon was plotting. Kim Jae-hoon recalled what Jong-hoon Eon had said because he had requested 5 people, including me, to protect that person. "It seems he is extremely important. What's his name?" He noticed the information line, Kim Gu-jin level 16 Phoenix on the phone, and Kim Jae-hoon's mind was filled with suspicion. He was on the participant list for Dungeon A+. But there was no way he could face the veterans of the Skull Club alone. This bait was so obvious that he didn't know whether to take the bait or not. The next morning, a yellow car parked in front of the fence of a villa. Kim Gu-jin sat in the car, speaking into the intercom. "I must have passed the test right." The person on the other end confirmed, "Yes, even faster than I thought. You hid your true abilities, didn't you?" He didn't wait for a response and continued, "Well, it's not that I doubt or anything, just personal curiosity." Kim Gu-jin explained, "I showcased my abilities because you requested it." The voice of the person on the other end came through the intercom. "Got it. Anyway, you said you wanted to buy a dungeon, right?" "I have listed the dungeons I found in locker number 19 at Yusan Station. Stop by, and if you need anything, just contact me." Kim Gu-jin stepped out of the car. "You informed the person on the intercom, understood, but I have a few things to do right now, so I will contact you again in a few days. The escort car over here will also respond to you. I will wait." Regina sat in the chair feeling suspicious. Was the boss really planning to do business with him? Has your intuition ever been right? The escort car smiled, turning towards him, asking back, "Has your intuition ever been right? And isn't the brokerage profession about making a living through risks?" Kim Gu-jin lowered his head, appearing extremely worried. "Mr. Park Yong-won, I find this a bit dangerous. Are you telling me to put myself out as bait?" Yong-won did not hide and straightforwardly admitted, "You understood correctly." He tilted his head, resting his arm on the armrest, saying, "I don't see how this works. And the things we talk about will turn into rumors, but the fact that the rumors reach the Skull Club is just a matter of time." He silently thought to himself that it seemed the kid was starting to get scared, but he didn't need to care. Kim Gu-jin bowed his head in silence as Yong-hoon's voice reached his ears. "Are you just going to sit there and wait to die?" He extended his hand towards him, enticing, "I personally hired an elite team for you. So trust me to go into the dungeon with them. How about that?" Kim Gujin raised his head facing Ion 1, asking, "But this is still playing with my life. Is there a reason that forces us to do this?" He offered an excuse. I apologize for that. But I owe them a few favors, and I am the kind of person who cannot feel at ease while still indebted to someone. In the end, Kim Gujin smiled slightly and made a request that I understood. If that's the case, there's no other way, but I want to raise, Yongguan thought to himself with a smug smile, thinking he had hooked me. Kim Gujin also smirked meaningfully as Yongguan snapped his fingers, signaling the person behind him. "No problem." Secretary Kim stepped forward and placed a brown piece of paper on the table. "The boss has prepared something for you, Kim Gujin." Yongguan asked again, "If you were stronger, then of course your survival rate would be higher, right?" Kim Gujin glanced at the paper that Secretary Kim pushed towards him silently, realizing it was a skill sheet. He didn't know how long it had been since he stepped out of the villa. Kim Gujin walked while pondering, feeling guilty before he returned here. Park Yong-hoon had come to meet Petsumoto, and he directed his gaze towards the building, silently lamenting that following the path of a traitor was indeed a timely decision. But it doesn't matter anymore. Kim Gujin took out the paper he had just received from his pocket, surprised that he had given himself this. He is more useful than I thought. Inside a stone cave, the sound of continuous sighs echoed in the space. Why are we so miserable? At this rate, I don't know when we will die. Will we be able to pay off all our debts, Han? The leader heard the complaints and turned around loudly, shouting to shut up and keep moving. He crossed his arms, reminding the others that the bastard Park Yong-hoon had gone easy on us. The first subordinate spoke up in indignation, but that's still too much, right? The second subordinate also felt the same and chimed in. "It's not our fault. And how the hell could we know who we had to help in this dungeon for how much longer?" Han cursed and turned to continue walking forward. "I don't even know if I have the strength to groan. Just go and kill the monster already in the dark cave that no one noticed." There was a monster with sharp teeth watching their every move. At night on the railway bridge, a train was passing by. Below the bridge, a car was parked and a crowd of people was gathering. A man pressed a phone to his ear, responding to the other end. "They have everything prepared. Yes, I will do that." He hung up the phone and pressed the end call button. The caller's name displayed on the screen was Park Yun-won. Jong-hoon glanced at the person in front of him. "So we just need to hand Kim Gujin over to you, right?" The person confirmed, "Yes, that's all." Jong-hoon raised the corner of his mouth, shifting his gaze to the suitcase full of money. "But that seems a bit too little, considering we will lose an important client." "Then you should compensate a bit more, right?" Kim Jae-hoon waved his hand, assuring him that if it was about money, once the job was done, he would receive quite a bit more. "I can also find you other clients if you want." Jong-hoon then made another request instead. "I want to make a contract with the Salvation Society if you can do that." "I don't think I need to be paid any extra." Kim Jae-hoon directly refused. "I can't do that." Because I alone cannot decide on matters related to the interests of the society, Jong-hoon did not discuss further, just casually replied, "Understood, that's fine." A while later, Kim Jae-hoon got into a red car and left. The group of Jong-hoon behind bowed respectfully. He stood up straight, sighing that he had struck gold. "After this, we will be rich," one of the accomplices behind exclaimed. "I didn't think there were people like this in the Salvation Society." John smiled. "He's just a human after all. Not everyone is like Jun's car," he turned around to declare to the others. "But what does that have to do with us? We just need to seize this opportunity and enjoy, after receiving enough money, of course." In another place, the beam of light suddenly went out, and a group of people stepped out from it. In the space echoed the voice of the dungeon that had been conquered by the man in the black suit. Rushing to the spot where the three people emerged from the beam of light, a voice shouted, "All members of the Skull Club survived." Secretary Nam-ha gaped when he saw the members of the Skull Club. Slowly gliding past, he wondered what happened to the members of the Phoenix Club. Did they all die? He waited, feeling lost, whispering in his head, "They are all elite members from Park Yong-gwan's faction." After a moment, Secretary Nam seemed to regain his composure and turned to call out, "Excuse me, please wait a moment." He asked the members of the Skull Club, "Do you know what happened to the members of the club?" "We do not." Secretary Nam pleaded with them in an extremely sincere tone. "At least tell me what happened so I can inform their relatives, please." Hongdi of the Skull Club froze. He pulled down the mask over his mouth and smiled wickedly. "Oh, those guys. I've dismembered their bodies to the point where they can't even be recognized." After saying that, Hongdae got into the car and the black car rolled away far. Matsumoto, sitting in the car, was pressing his phone while reminding, "Did you forget what the leader said? Be careful not to make noise." Hong Jesse replied, "I know already." Timasumoto pressed the phone to his ear. "This is Matsumoto. We just finished our job, but why is there more? On the other end, Kim Ji-hoon urgently ordered, I found the target. He will enter the dungeon as soon as it starts to get light. Come right away. Matsumoto's indifferent voice came from the screen. And why should we follow your orders? Kim Ji-hoon raised his voice threateningly. You don't have time! If you miss this opportunity, what will you say to the leader then? Matsumoto had no choice but to agree, all right, let's go there and discuss it further. After hanging up just a second later, a message was sent to his phone. The content of the message was, Hunt Lizard Soldiers Level 2. Difficulty D plus maximum number of participants, 10 participation condition below level 29, completion condition, eliminate all lizard soldiers. At the same time, on the side of the luxurious villa, Youngwon leaned on his hands at his hips, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, quietly calculating, so there is a foreign faction in Korea. This will be a good opportunity as long as I use the Skull Club properly. He rubbed his chin, talking to himself. I always thought it was a waste of talent if I only operated in Korea. Youngwon looked at the gold watch he was wearing on his wrist. He thought, even if the plan doesn't go smoothly and Kim Gu-jin dies, at least I'll have information about the Skull Club. Now it's almost time. On this side, in front of a black tent, many people were already standing and waiting. Kim Gu-jin stood on this side, silently raising an eyebrow, quietly observing them from afar. Young-hooni was the first to spot him. He waved his hand, calling the rookie over here. He extended a hand, introducing himself. Nice to meet you, I am Jang Hoon-yeon. Kim Gu-jin nodded and introduced himself. My name is Kim Gu-jin. Jang Hoon-yeon appeared friendly and responded. Then let's do our best to complete the dungeon. There was supposed to be another team, but it seems they are late. Just as he finished speaking, a white car drove up behind Kim Gu-jin, kicking up a cloud of dust. Jong-hyun smiled as he looked at the car. They are here. 4 people from the Skull Gang stepped out of the car, all wearing black masks, looking very mysterious. Kim Gu-jin squinted and glanced at them. He suddenly asked, Excuse me, but where is the restroom? Jong-hoon, hearing the question, suggested, The restroom, I was about to go there too, let me show you. There was a blue sign hanging on the wall. Above it, the word restroom was printed along with a symbol representing men. Jong-hyun crossed his arms and leaned against the wall, asking, So are you the one we have to escort? Kim Gu-jin did not answer, but countered, So you guys are the team that Park Yong-ho mentioned. Jong-hyun stood up straight. It's almost time. Let's talk more as we walk. He continued to explain his arrangements, saying that those who arrived later shouldn't see them together in the dungeon. Kim Gu-jin asked, Are you saying I have to go alone? Jong-hoon waved his hand to reassure him, Don't worry, we won't be too far from you. There will always be someone secretly following you. He continued speaking. Anyway, there's a high chance of an ambush on the 2nd floor. If we start fighting right away, completing the dungeon will be very difficult. Kim Gu-jin walked beside him, bowing his head, not knowing what he was thinking. Jong-hoon confidently asserted, Don't worry, we know what we're doing. Just trust us and go in there. He glanced at him and replied, All right. I will follow your instructions. Jong-hoon was pleased and exclaimed, Good. Then you will go in first. If we go in together, it will raise suspicion. Kim Gu-jin said nothing more. Following his instructions, he turned and entered the tent alone. Jang Hoon-young watched his back, his eyes glinting with cunning, thinking to himself that things seemed smoother than he expected. Inside the forest, there were many large trees growing closely together with beams of sunlight streaming through the gaps shining down on the clear ground. The group had split into 2 sides. On the right were those in Hoon-young and some of his underlings, while on the left were the members of the Skull Gang. A message appeared. Attention to reach the next floor, eliminate the goblin hiding to avoid encountering the large group. Someone spoke up, indicating that the 1st floor was more about exploration. Jong Hoon-yeon seriously instructed the remaining team members, The conditions for completion aren't too difficult, so let's split up here and search on our own. He pointed at Kim Gu-jin and said to him, It seems you will go alone, so we will send someone with you. Jin-guk volunteered himself, Let me go with him. Jong Hoon-yeon immediately agreed, All right, Jin-guk. He loudly ordered the other members, Now there's no time for nonsense. Deal with the goblin as quickly as possible and move on to the 2nd floor. Finally, the 2 groups separated. Only Kim Gu-jin and Jin-guk were left. Before going far, Jong Hoon-yeon secretly glanced back and nodded slightly. Kim Gu-jin received his signal. He also nodded in response, then glanced towards the Skull Gang members, thinking to himself that the battle would begin on the 2nd floor. Matsumoto closed his eyes and curiously asked, Why not just capture Kim Gu-jin now? What if he dies? That would be a big problem. Yahun simply explained, "The group we hired will ensure his safety. There won't be any issues. The trouble arises when things don't go according to plan." He uttered the next words as Kim Gu-jin ran away. Machimoto spoke in a disjointed manner, implying that his gaze was probing, showing he didn't trust their abilities, which was why he had to come all the way here. Yahun calmly denied, "No need to be so sensitive, that's not what I meant." In his mind, he added, "I'm just here to clean up the Hunyo group." After that, in the opposite direction, Jong Hunyan sat under a tree and asked his underlings, "So what is Kim Gu-jin doing?" The guy with the hood replied, "He's hunting snails. Looks pretty good. He's using poison blood to catch them one by one." Jong Hunyan stroked his chin, pondering, "Poison blood, is there anything else?" The hooded guy couldn't understand and asked, "Why are you so worried?" The bald guy also felt displeased. "Do you think these guys can't handle one person?" Jong-hoon told the two of them no. "Because everything is too simple, I became suspicious of that guy who just stood up while analyzing Park Yong-hoon and Kim Jae-hun, who are not the type to throw around a lot of money like that. Jin-guk is still following him, and someone answered, 'Yes, sir.' Are you planning to go to him?" Jong-hoon set up a scheme. "If we go together, he will trust us more. And when he lets his guard down, capturing him will be as easy as pie." Jong-hoon's group slowly advanced into the deep forest where scattered white bones lay before them. The underling turned around, searching, certain that he had just been here. But where did he run off to? Jong-hoon made a guess. If he ran, there must be traces. He glanced around, relying on the smell of blood, and it must be here. But why can't Jin-guk be seen on the ground before them lay the bodies of a few hyenas? Jong-hoon spoke up, wondering what had happened, focusing his gaze ahead and exclaiming, "Something's not right." The underling shrank back as if seeing something, pointing and shouting, "Boss over there!" In the distance, Jin-suk lay still motionless. Beneath him was a pool of bright red blood. Near him was Kim Gu-jin, who had also passed out with a pool of blood spreading beneath him. Jong-hoon shouted for the other underlings to check on Jin-suk, while the others kept watch around as Min-sik tended to Jin-suk. The underlings received the order and immediately spread out in various directions to keep watch, while Kim Min-sik quickly ran to Jin-suk's side. Suddenly, he froze, his eyes wide open. Jin-suk had been unconscious all this time, suddenly opened his mouth wide, blood continuously pouring out from inside. Kim Min-sik was drenched in cold sweat, shouting, "This is bad! The wound on his neck is very severe." Jin-gu's eyes slightly opened, and he coughed continuously. Kim Min-sik pressed tightly on his neck, demanding, "Stay still, I can't stop the bleeding if you keep talking or moving." Jin-gu's body trembled, using all his strength to raise his arm and point in one direction. Kim Min-sik glanced in the direction of his finger and saw Kim Gu-jin lying over there. Sweat droplets fell from Kim Min-sik's face as he frowned and shouted loudly, "No matter what, we can't hand him over to Kim Jae-hun. Let's deal with our lives first. We can think about the customer later." Jong-hoon, standing far away, worriedly turned around and asked, "What's wrong? What's going on with Jin-guk?" Kim Min-sik, while using healing magic on him, replied, "It's very critical. At this rate, he will really die, boss." Jong-hoon gritted his teeth, silently wondering what the hell had happened. Clearly, they all knew they were on the same side, so there couldn't be any ambush from the other side. He suddenly remembered Kim Jae-hoon's words. "This matter is related to the Savior Society, so be careful. We must ensure that no one knows about this." Jong-hyun was startled, as if he realized he was planning to silence us all. Kim Min-sik, in a panic, called out loudly, "Don't dawdle, boss. Jin-guk is bleeding too much." He announced that only your healing magic can help him, not mine. At this point, Kim Min-sik suddenly fell silent as a skeleton soldier appeared behind him. He seemed to sense something. He turned around to take a look. As soon as Kim Min-sik made eye contact with the skeleton soldier, it swung its arm and struck. A second later, dark red blood gushed out from his body. Blood of various sizes stained both of Kim Min-sik's hands. The bald guy, seeing that scene, was stunned and screamed loudly. Kim Min-sik Jong-hoon also stood there, stunned, silently analyzing in his head how to inflict such a wound on Jin-guk, as they wanted to deal with our healer first. This means they are very experienced in PK. He glanced at the bald guy, thinking, "I think Kim Jae-hoon tricked us. I should have been more careful. This request is too suspicious." At this moment, a group of skeleton soldiers rushed out from somewhere surrounding the three of them in the center. At the same time, on the side of the Skull Society, Kim Shich reminded the others not to overdo it. "Save your strength." Hong stepped on the corpse of a hyena, praising these creatures. "Knowing I'm handsome, so just come at me." Kim Shich waved his hand mockingly. Probably not because of your disgusting smell. Next time you enter the dungeon, could you spray a little perfume? Hong raised his arms, sniffing his own scent while rebutting, "What do you mean by that? Do you know how much money I spent on perfume?" Kim Sitch calmly pointed behind him. "You idiot. I've told you so many times already. Every monster is sniffing around here. Look over there, your fans are rushing in. Behind a pack of hyenas is charging." Hong stood still, confidently asking, "As long as I welcome them enthusiastically, what's the problem?" The hyena opened its mouth wide, revealing sharp teeth, drool dripping out. Before it could bite its target, a hand reached out and grabbed Hong. Hong tightened his grip around the hyena's neck with one hand, while lifting its body into the air with the other. His eyes narrowed, glowing with a red light of ferocity. Hong swung his arms to the sides, splitting the hyena's body in half. Another hyena raised its claws, lunging to attack as its claws descended. From below, a fist rose up, landing a punch on the hyena's head, shattering it, blood splattering as the hyena's body collapsed to the ground in front of him. Hong's face was splattered with blood, tears streaming beside him. A hyena was staring at him with its mouth wide open. Elsewhere in the forest, surrounded by tall trees, sunlight filtered through the green leaves. Sunlight shone down, and at the corner of his mouth there was a blood stain as he gritted his teeth, uttering each word, "You bastard, why did you betray us?" Kim Gu-jin lowered his head, looking at him, saying, "Betrayal. You're about to meet your end, yet you still won't be honest," you disdainfully said, looking at those players who only know how to use the power granted to them for their own benefit to the point where I'm no longer surprised. But your greed this time has crossed the line. Kim Gu-jin asked him, "You once said that the value of each person is different, right?" Jung-hoon raised his face and cursed. "How did you return to the past?" The lamp on the table emitted a soft yellow light and a voice echoed in the space. "Why are there members of the Salvation Society here? What's so special about that Kim Gu-jin?" Both Park Yong-hoon and Kim Ja-hun were interested in him. John Hooney smirked, explaining that he wanted to keep Kim Gu-jin alive to ask a few things. The underling wearing a hat felt aggrieved. If not handled, the boss wouldn't get to enjoy his fun. John Hooney pulled down his sleeve to show them the scars on his arm. "You mean this? Let's save it for next time. Just a little more and we could hunt that bald guy?" He pointed to a spot on the guy's arm. "You could handle a lot." "This is from the three of us. We saved your lives last time, right?" he excitedly said. "The more requests like this, the better. There were only 3 of us, yet we earned a lot." Completing a dungeon, John Hooney smiled slyly. "Do you think everyone's life has the same price? Everything has different values." He and his underlings turned to leave. The last words echoed in the space, "And we only kill if the price is right." In the seats where they weren't paying attention, Kim Gu-jin had heard everything. Back in reality, he conjured a sword in his hand, and now he was quite curious. Jong-hoon couldn't escape. He could only look up at Kim Gu-jin, who without hesitation swung his sword. "How much is your life worth?" "When you turned away." At that moment, the head of Jong-hoonian fell to the ground in a dark forest. Kim Gu-jin raised an eyebrow in front of the goblin. "So it hid in the same place as last time when I came to this dungeon. You coldly said, now let's go down to the next level." Kim Gu-jin left a remark that the skull comrades shouldn't be kept waiting, and then you raised your sword to finish off the goblin. The system displayed a notification that you had completed the first level of the dungeon. Immediately, a beam of light shot up into the sky, making Jae-hoon's group pay attention, while the others exclaimed that the first level had been completed. How the hell Jae-hoon turned his head back and thought that Hoon-yeon should have signaled if he had found the goblin right Machimatogi or this kind of reaction. Then this must not be his plan. He pondered that completing the first level was completely unexpected. It seemed they had already reached the second level and were waiting to ambush us. Obviously, the group shifted towards the beam of light. Jae-hoon frowned, thinking, "Damn it, did they guess my assassination plan? How could they betray me first?" That's right. Kim Gu-jin stood before a gigantic gate, gently touching it, and then he pushed lightly, causing the gate to open with light from the other side shining into his face. The system displayed that it was moving to the second level, transitioning to the building. Secretary Kim suddenly spoke up. Most players buy a lot of items. Every time they prepare to enter the dungeon, Yongwon, sitting in a chair, asked if there was a problem. Secretary Kim read the report that he bought a large quantity of test tubes, so I found it a bit strange. She told me that the blood and bodily fluids from various types of monsters are very expensive, but in the dungeon he went to, there was nothing valuable at all. So I reported back to you, Yongwon, who frowned and said that buying containers for materials while risking his life to bait that Kim Gu-jin, what the hell is he thinking? In the forest, Jae-hoon's group, gradually approached the magical gate. Chumoto quietly said they seemed to have reached the second level first. There's a high chance they are lying in ambush, so be prepared. Hong Si stood beside Jehun, patting his shoulder thanks to someone we finally get to enjoy a meal. We should show a bit of gratitude, right? But then he felt annoyed thinking that bastard in Hunyon would pay for making me lose face. The whole gang gripped their swords tightly and slowly stepped into the gate. The system announced it was moving to the second level. The gate emitted an incredibly bright light, but deep in the lake, a monster was closing its eyes. Suddenly, it opened its bright red eyes as if it had been awakened. Machimoto expressed surprise. What is this? I thought when we appeared they would rush in, but it seems that's not the case. Hongdae stepped forward and cut the rope at his feet, scared that they had all run away. He sensed something was off and stopped for a moment as a barrage of arrows flew towards him, which he blocked with his hands. Then the arrow shattered, and inside was all blood. The other guys were also splattered with blood from the arrows. Hongdae looked at the blood on his hands and asked, "What the hell is this? Is this blood?" They looked at the blood on the ground and asked each other about the arrows with test tubes attached. Someone picked up an arrow and wondered what it was. It was a perfect ambush opportunity. Hongjae complained about the stench, and Kim Gu-jin appeared out of nowhere. "Sorry for the stench. I thought this smell would suit you." Hongjae yelled, "That bastard is just messing with us. Where is Jong Hoon-yeon? Do you think you will be safe after playing tricks on us like this?" Yehun silently called out his name, Kim Ujin. Kim Ujin frowned, thinking, just as I expected, this guy still thinks I'm on Jong Hoon-yeon's side. You smirked and said, "What do you mean by joking around?" I knew how this would end. You will also handle it well with Hoon-yeon and his gang. But I didn't think you would follow us all the way here. Kim Jehun from the Salvation Society said so. Let's put that aside. Now is not the time for nonsense. Machimoto quickly noticed something was wrong at the lake behind him. Something was rushing towards them. A giant lizard warrior emerged, targeting a golden orc in that group. Too bad for him, the lizard warrior quickly bit his head off, causing the golden orc to drop dead on the spot. Hongda stared wide-eyed at Yehun, horrified by what just happened. The lizard warrior advanced to the shore, still holding the unfortunate one in its mouth. Machimoto turned to look at Gujin and shouted, "What the hell did you do? You held up a vial of blood and said that the red stuff all over you comes from that goblin." Gujin smirked and said, "And it's also a favorite snack of the lizard warriors, and since I lost a lot of sauce, it's obvious that you all will become a feast." "A lavish feast for the lizard warriors, then." Machimoto yelled out, "Cursing you bastard, I'll kill you." He crazily charged towards Gujin. Hongdae turned to call out to him, "Machimoto, don't leave us behind." Machimoto immediately raised his sword to attack Gujin, who also raised his sword to parry. He shouted, "I'll mork your eyes and shove them up your ass. You challenged him. Keep barking louder." Suddenly, Gujin noticed something. He looked at the patterns on Machimoto's sword and thought the sword of the sword master. Gujin looked up at him and said, "Looking at how blood rushed to your face, I thought you were just a regular soldier. But I didn't expect you to be the disciple of the sword master." Machimoto exclaimed in surprise what he suddenly asked, "How do you know?" Jehun turned his head to look for Yonghun and Ion. Kim Ujin is not the issue. He stood there thinking our side only has 4 people left, but we still have enough strength to complete this dungeon. But Hongdae held an axe to block the wide-open mouth of the lizard warrior and yelled, "What the hell is going on?" Kim Jehun shouted back, "Help me out here," Jehun frowned, thinking. Jonghun appeared just in time. The Feta forces were scattered like this. The lizard warrior stood tall in front of those two. Yehun thought the one to die would be Feta. The 2 swords clashed, creating a sharp sound. Machimoto suspiciously asked, "How do you know?" Gujin smirked and replied, "Just a guess, but it seems I guessed right, huh?" Machimoto went mad and swung his sword at Ujin. "Shut up. You easily got angry, but I have to admit I have a talent for provoking others." Part of his anger was also because he thought he couldn't match swords with him anymore, but you were completely mistaken. Ujin suddenly bit his lip. Machimoto pulled his sword back and prepared to slash. He swiped his sword in a line, forcing Gujin to jump back to dodge. Machimoto stared at him. Then Gujin played a trick, spitting blood out of his mouth. His blood splattered on Machimoto's face. He felt something was off and stepped back, damn it. Machimoto wiped the blood away and cursed, "You coward." Spitting blood on my face, a notification appeared. "You have been poisoned. Vitality continuously decreasing." He gritted his teeth, thinking, "I have to kill you, you bastard. This is definitely it." Machimoto lightly spun the sword in his hand, raising it high. A massive source of power was concentrating on the sword. Gujin was indeed a bit shocked looking at him. This move is definitely it. You remember Sejun and Ken, the butcher's special skill of Saint Guang, the motorcycle demon, pointing the tip of his sword down to the ground and then flicking it, creating a slash that hit Gu Jin. The system announced that Saint Guang's butcher's skill was targeting you. He squinted his eyes, focusing intensely to block this slash from the motorcycle demon, leaving a cloud of dust behind. He slightly slumped down from exhaustion. He still hadn't mastered it yet. The burden was too heavy on the motorcycle demon's body, gripping the sword that should have captured him. Suddenly, Gu Jin had retreated right behind him without him noticing. He turned around in horror, unable to believe that he had dodged that move. Gu Jin unleashed a flurry of slashes at the motorcycle demon. He couldn't believe it and wondered how an unknown could dodge his full-force attack. His eyes widened as he spat blood. Machimoto remembered the past. When he was practicing slashing at some upside-down straw brooms, Machimoto tiredly knelt down. Finally, he could use that skill from his master, but with his current ability. He could only use it once. Ken approached coldly and said, "Finally, you have learned it." But he warned that he still shouldn't use it in real combat. Having only used it once, his hands were already trembling like that. Ken pointed at him and said, "High damage means using a lot of stamina and putting a huge burden on your body if you use this move in real combat, and if the opponent knows that weakness. Then you will be done for." The motorcycle demon seemed to want to retort, but Ken quickly said, "There will come a time when you face those who won't go down after that full-force attack. And when you are exhausted after using the move," Gu Jin swung his sword to slash the motorcycle demon. Ken's teachings echoed in his head. "The one who will go down will be you." Finally, the motorcycle demon fell. He had met that person. Master Hongdae shouted upon seeing this. However, he had left an opening, and the lizard warrior headbutted him, causing Hongdae to slam hard against the tree trunk. This attack caused such severe injury that Hongdae had to cough up blood. Yehun looked at him and thought, "They told me I was the disciple of the sword leader, but why is every one of them so useless?" Moreover, none of the guys in Hunyang had shown up. Our side had no chance. Finally, Jehun decided to propose a truce, saying, "We don't need to fight to the death like this." He told Gu Jin that it would be better to cease fire and focus on completing the dungeon. If this continued, then all of us would become the monster's dinner. He smirked and said, "You don't need to worry about me." The guy panicked and exclaimed, "What?" Gu Jin told them to disappear. "Then we will have more free hands to clean this dungeon." Jehun looked astonished at what the hell that was. A bony hand emerged from the ground as a whole skeleton army slowly appeared. The notification system announced the summoning of the skeletal warrior. Gu Jin looked down on him and wondered why he should believe you when you just shouted to take me down. Jehun widened his eyes, looking at the bloodthirsty boy. And now the soul summoning technique, which was not mentioned in the report, a tall figure was standing ominously behind him. The lizard warrior opened its mouth wide and bit down. Luckily, Jehun managed to dodge in time. However, the lizard warrior quickly ran behind him. Jehun covered his face with his hands and closed his eyes, waiting for his fate, but the lizard couldn't attack. Jehun opened his eyes in panic to see Hongdae swinging an axe at its tail. He spoke the watchdog of the Savior Association. Hongdae was close, begging him for mercy, but there was no time to help me. The lizard warrior took the opportunity to escape. It wrapped its tail around and tightened around GHE, and then he was caught in its grasp. The lizard stared wide-eyed at GHE, who was not afraid, shouted back, "Let me go, you stinky lizard. Your stench is about to make me vomit." The lizard warrior tightened its grip with its tail, while Jehun stood there thinking that he could help you with faith and hope. Surely the guy looked up at it and thought, "Damn it, what now? How to escape this situation now?" Jehun gritted his teeth, thinking he couldn't handle this lizard on his own. Therefore, he was cowardly. He decided that fleeing was the best option. Jehun turned his feet, preparing to run, trying to be a hero hiding until they cleared the dungeon. He turned around during that time, slowly calculating his next move. Survival was the top priority. He couldn't die uselessly in this place. As he was running, he noticed something. Jehun turned his face back, thinking something had just brushed past a skeleton wielding a sword stabbed into the lizard's neck. He gasped as a skeletal soldier appeared. The lizard warrior had been affected by the blood poison. Jehun stared at the skeleton, thinking, "It's just a skeleton, how can it move like that?" Almost on par with a high-level player now. The skeletons quickly gathered around the lizard, and moreover, there were 5 of them, not just one. Wait, if Kimuji was this strong, he thought. That means he also took care of the whole group in the Ion dungeon then. So that's why they hadn't appeared until now. The lizard opened its wide, sharp-jawed mouth, and it was mysterious how all the members of the Skull Guild had perished in that dungeon. The lizard's tail raised high, and it became clear. Yehun was sweating. He had to escape this place at all costs to report back. But why was the lizard warrior chasing him so closely? Why did it ignore the skeletons just to pursue him? A skeleton moved forward to block it using its sword to slash multiple times at the lizard warrior's legs. It stared wide-eyed at the skeletons, and then the lizard fell to the ground. The system announced that due to the effect of blood poison, the strength of the lizard warrior was continuously decreasing. Yehun exclaimed, "Got it!" However, the lizard warrior slowly stood up, lowering its sharp eyes to look at him. Yehun was horrified, thinking, "It's still not down. What the hell is keeping it alive?" Then the lizard looked at them, Yehun, and it startled him, making him panic, thinking, "No way. Why is it so fixated on me?" As if the skeleton soldiers were completely invisible. Yehun turned and ran. The skeletons chased after him, attacking the lizard, while Gujin leisurely watched, thanks to you using yourself as bait for the lizard, making the battle much easier.